What is the sickest burn you have seen a teacher give to a student? You seem to be a bit of an intellectual snob. Your academic performance makes me wonder why. Our math teacher placed a book on the marker tray of the whiteboard with an arrow on the board connecting the book to the sentence. Marco's biography. The book was called The Ugliest Boy. Marco was a student, and was also the teacher's son. My teacher once told the class, clown, intelligent thoughts follow you. However, you are always faster. There was a student one time who always interrupted the class, so one day my teacher called him the designated enemy of progress. This was in 8th grade. We had a math teacher who was a bit rotund and rosy-cheeked and upon reflection a bit effeminate. As we all know, girls of that age can get a bit tightly wound and dramatic. So every time there was a confrontation like that in class, he would sing the teapot song at them with dance move and everything. For those who do not know, I'm a little teapot, short and stout. This is my handle, this is my spout. When I get all steamed up, hear me shout, tip me over and pour me out. Probably the most effective 14-year-old girl diffuser I have ever seen. I was a teacher for a few years some time ago. During my first year of teaching was when Eminem was getting really popular. I had this one student who was very into Eminem, to the point of replicating haircut, hair color, style of dress, etc. This student was also frequently disruptive. One morning, as I was trying to start class, he was standing next to his desk, chatting with another student and totally oblivious to the fact that class was starting. So I look right at him, get his attention, and say, "Are you the real Slim Shady?" No. Then sit down. Small victories.
Have you ever not slept for so long that you started hallucinating? What was your experience? I hadn't slept for about 72 hours when I went to the ER. Doc gave me Ambien. I go home, get in bed and take one. A few minutes later, the floor was covered in water and the walls were melting. It was raining outside and the water on my windows was marching in formation. I've never known whether that was sleep deprivation or the effects of Ambien. I've never taken another. Yes, I saw shadow creatures and I thought they were out to get me. Yeah, after 70 hours or so. It's pretty disorienting and rational thinking starts to get very slow. The hallucinations are not realistic but are more like gaps in your vision that are shaped like things. Might see a silhouette at a distance or briefly around a corner. Very difficult to function in this state. Would not recommend. Spent a few weeks only getting about 4 hours of sleep a night. My brain started seeing, from the corners of my eyes, black things dropping from the ceiling that looked like giant spiders. I started making sure I got enough sleep. Waiters, what's the saddest time waiting for someone you have experienced? I haven't bartended in a million years, but the saddest one was a guy in his 30s. He had a two-top, asked for a bottle of top-shelf champagne, candles lit, all that, told me they were celebrating. No one showed. Guy looked morose, but had an appetizer, poured a glass of champagne for the person who wasn't there, then asked for the bill. I felt bad, he obviously got stood up, so I brought him a dessert in the house. He smiled, and told me it was his anniversary. My face must have showed my sadness for him. So he clarified his wife died of cancer a few months ago. It may have been the saddest thing I've seen. I was actually a hostess at the time and I was asked to take the table for a server. An old man came in asking for a table of 6 and he asked for 6 waters. I set up his table and I put his order in. He said it was his birthday. He was there for about an hour or two and nobody showed up. It was really sad. He ended up tipping me like $30 and he said sorry for the trouble. I still think about that guy. I hope he's doing okay. Former spoiled rotten kids, when did the real world really hit you? I was a spoiled rotten child and also into my teen years. My parents bought me a brand new red convertible for my 16th birthday. I threw a fit over it because what I actually wanted was my brother's old car, that we still had, which was dark blue in color. I was so shallow and a horrible person back then. So what really turned me around? That next summer I took a job as a camp counselor at a local day camp. I did not have to work but I was bored and sounded like something easy to do. God, I was so wrong. This day camp was specifically geared to the lower classes who could not afford childcare during the summer. We served them breakfast, lunch, and an afternoon snack. For a lot of the camp kids this was all they would eat that day and on Fridays they would beg for extra food snacks to take home for themselves and or their siblings because they may not get to eat. Again until Monday. This really hit me hard but the part that got me the most. This one kid, around 5 to 6, would refuse to take their shoes and socks off, even if we were going to the public pool that day. I couldn't understand why until one day he came in limping, like his feet were causing him so much pain. I convinced him to let me help him get his shoes and socks so I could see what might be bothering him. Once I did, it took everything in me not to break down right there. His socks were covered in blood, his poor tiny little feet were covered in sores and his toes seemed to curl under a bit. He was in so much pain from the state of his feet. As it turns out, he had been wearing shoes about 3 sizes too small. His family couldn't afford new shoes. I took my lunch break and went out to buy him new socks and a few pairs of shoes. This broke me. Which I definitely needed. It changed my way of thinking forever.
My ex dumped me to get her kitty pounded by sweaty frat guys. Now she's begging for me back. We were high school sweethearts and each other's first everything. I thought she was going to be the one. However, she had other plans. After a week of partying in college, she came home and broke up with me. Her reasoning? That while she loves me with all of her heart and I am the one she wants to be with forever and marry while she is in college, she does not want to be tied down and needed to be able to have her fun. She even went on to tell me that she wanted to make sure I knew she would always practice safe intimacy for our future together. I begged her not to do this and that under no circumstance would I ever consider this okay. She said that over time I'd understand and to stop being a weak little B-word. She even made me promise to use protection as well. 2 weeks later, she called me and asked me if I stopped acting like an immature brat. Before I even said anything, she started telling me all about how she got pounded by 4 guys, 2 of which she did at the same time. I broke down when she told me this. She said she did not want to hurt me so she wouldn't be telling me any more about what she does. I told her that I had no desire to talk with her anymore period. That I was willing to work on things before she slept with other people, but that was the end of it for me. She said once again that I was being immature and that she would just wait for me to contact her when I was grown up enough to understand that there is a difference between intimacy and love. That was the last time I spoke to her until about 1 month ago when she moved back home and showed up at my house one night acting like we had been together and not apart for 3 years. She did not expect nor appreciate my reaction to her showing up. I opened the door and there she was with a big smile on her face. She immediately asked to come in and I said I would come outside, which obviously caught her off guard. I asked what she wanted and she said, and I quote, "Well, that's a hell of a way to greet someone you love." To which I told her that she was delusional and that whatever love I had for her died the day she told me she had already started having intimacy with other men. She honestly had a very confused look on her face and then said, and I quote again, "Are you still uptight about all of that?" and then said, "I would have thought by now you would have grown up about that." I told her that not only was I not over it, that I would never be over it other than to be over us. At which time she proceeds to say to me, "You mean to tell me you are throwing away everything that we are together because of some stupid physical issue? I know we love each other and are meant to be together, so how do we fix this?" I was just dumbstruck. How can one person be this stupid? I asked her what I was throwing away. We have not spoken in almost 3 years other than via text, and even then it was her texting me and not me replying. She left very disappointed and that should have been the end of it. But here is the kick in the butt. I have now been inundated by friends, her family, and hell even some of my family wanting to know why I was throwing away someone so special. I ended up telling my family members the truth, and after they heard about it they quickly recanted and told me to tell her to F off. But to her family, I just said she dumped me years ago and we hadn't been together for almost 3 years. This came as a shock to them, as she had been telling them all along that we were still a couple, and even when she was home on breaks would tell them we planned on marrying. At first, they didn't believe me that we hadn't seen each other in years, and I'm still not sure they do. I told my parents and they suggested that I should just go along with what she says because she's my one true love. My friends are even saying the same. They know the truth and yet they think I'm being weird about all of this. They said when you are young you are supposed to play the field, but if you love someone you know that in the end, you will be together. Am I wrong? What's your worst make-out session? While we were making out, she bit off the tip of my tongue and broke one of my teeth. The girl I was dating when I was 20 was a bit crazy. She was a lot older than me and was just getting out of a divorce. Apparently, her husband left her because he couldn't handle being with a crazy woman anymore. I should have taken this as a red flag, but I didn't. I stayed with her mainly because she was hot and because my friends were praising me for having a rich cougar girlfriend. I like how confident she made me feel and how much money she had. When she and her husband divorced, she somehow got all of his money. She also got 2 of his mansions and 2 of his cars. She gave me a BMW while she stayed with a Porsche. How could I break up with a woman when she gave me a BMW? This woman was also a freak in the sheets. She was always trying something new and exotic on me whenever we had intimacy. This night in particular she wanted to try out some new ways of making out. I usually just let her do whatever she wants because if I let her stay in control she usually gives me $200. Anyways, she's making out with me and stuff when all of a sudden she starts to crazily bite my lip and my tongue. It was starting to hurt and my lip was bleeding, so I told her to calm down with the biting. She was not calming down, so I ended up pushing her off of me. She told me she was going to stop and I believed her. We continue to make out when all of a sudden she gives my tongue a hard chomp. Blood starts trickling out of my mouth and that's when she shows me what she has in her mouth. It's the tip of my tongue. I pushed her off of me immediately and started screaming. She did not like that at all. She picked up the lamp that was on my bedside table and whacked me in the head with it. She then punched me in my mouth, which broke one of my teeth. I kicked her out of my apartment and locked the door. I waited until she was gone to drive myself to the emergency room. Today I messed up by not believing my best friend's self-destruction call for help. Trigger warning: self-destruction attempt and depression. Basically the title: my best friend has been going through a tough time for the past few years. He's depressed and has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He used to be employed but wasn't performing as well as he usually has because of his mental condition and lost his job. I try reaching out to him but he doesn't answer calls and he usually just replies but only through texts. On December 24th, he finally got back to me apologizing for not answering or replying to me lately. He said he's been going through a lot of stuff and that this time he doesn't know if he can handle it anymore. Me and my friend have a close but very sarcastic kind of friendship, so I just brushed it off. Best friend said he was contemplating ending it all and that he wanted to just jump off something. He mentioned a building in our city that was less 10 stories high. I made an insensitive remark telling him, "Don't be dumb, that building isn't high enough, you'll just end up with broken bones, be in pain and alive, why not a higher building?" This has always been the way we talk to each other for more than 10 years and this isn't the first time we talked about morbid stuff like this. That's how we cope with stuff and we always just laugh it off. We usually just try to one-up each other with wittier remarks regardless of how dark or morbid our discussions are. Instead of me calling to check on him, we just kept on messaging, continuing to be sarcastic to each other, or so I thought. Even told him to go to my house and told him that we should just celebrate Christmas together. He declined. His last message to me was, "I love you man, haha." My last message to him was, "Hold on and let's look forward to better things by next year." A few hours after my message, I found out my best friend jumped off the building. Based on witness accounts, I think he was already in the building when he started texting with me. I wish I had called him instead. Maybe it could have ended differently. It's not a total horrible story because he actually survived. He was rushed to the hospital and is relatively okay condition physically despite the fall. Now, I'm distraught that I didn't do more. Now, knowing what happened to him, I can't imagine what he's going through, and I don't know what I can say or do when I'm able to talk to him again. I'm so thankful that he's alive, but I know that what he's going through will become 10 or 100 times harder now. Also knowing that at any time he could do it again. This sucks.
I trusted my lazy boyfriend to watch my dog and he almost got her unalived. I'm trying my best to fight back tears as I write this. Everything is still so fresh, and I am feeling so ashamed that I could let this happen. I knew my boyfriend was a lazy piece of poop and I can't forgive myself for putting my dog in this situation in the first place. I'm 27 years old, and I had been with my SHD boyfriend, Dave, for about 10 months now. When we first met, Dave seemed like a really cool, relaxed guy, but after we started dating I slowly started to see lots of red flags. He was super sweet and funny, but he would sleep all the time and was generally a really unreliable person. When I would call him for a ride or a favor, he would never answer or always turn me down. I also noticed he was constantly on the verge of getting fired since he showed up at work stoned all the time and overslept on a weekly basis. Either way, I didn't want to mother him or boss him around, so I tried to just focus on his good traits as we kept dating. He lives with his parents, but I have my own apartment where I live with my 6-year-old dog, Chloe. She's my baby and I love her with all my heart. She is the friendliest dog you'll ever meet and everyone who pets her tells me how soft she is. She tried to warm up to Dave, but he wasn't really a pet person, so he didn't give her much attention when he came over. Anyway, I had known Dave was unreliable, but I never realized just how inattentive he was until this week. Last week, I got an urgent call from my older sister where she told me our mom was having a health scare and I needed to come home immediately. I was so worried. I live 3 states away from my family and all I was focused on was getting home to my family as fast as possible. Usually, when I travel, I leave my dog with a trusted sitter, but I had no time since I needed to leave as fast as possible. That's how I ended up asking Dave to house sit and take care of Chloe for me while I went to visit my mom. I hammered into him how important it was to walk Chloe daily and remember to feed her since I knew how forgetful he could be, but he assured me that she would be fine. I want to rip my effing hair out when I think about how awful I felt when I said goodbye to Chloe right before I left. As I was hugging her goodbye, I had this tiny voice screaming in my head that this was a bad idea. I will never ignore my instincts again after this experience, and I will never forgive myself for leaving her like that. My mom ended up recovering, and I only stayed with my family for about 3 days. I was checking in with Dave every couple of hours, and he never told me that anything was out of the ordinary. By the time I was flying home, I was exhausted and just looking forward to cuddling with my dog in my own bed. You can imagine my shock and heartbreak when I walked into my house, greeted Dave, and then called out to Chloe, only to see my baby hobble up to me on 3 effing legs. I screamed at the top of my lungs and yelled at Dave to tell me what happened. He was so nonchalant, he just kept telling me to calm down, but I was a mess. I was sobbing and holding Chloe while Dave confessed to me that he had let Chloe out to pee on the lawn the other night, but then he had gone back inside to lie down and ended up forgetting her outside all night. He said the next morning he went out looking for her and found her in the middle of the road down my street. She was injured and he assumed she had been hit by a car. He said he took her straight to the vet and she had a wound on her leg that was too severe for them to treat, so they had no choice but to amputate it. I had never felt so guilty and heartbroken in my life. I was livid at Dave for letting something like this happen, but I was more angry at myself than anything. I was just sitting there on the floor, holding Chloe and crying as Dave kept telling me to try and calm down. When he finally started talking about the bill, saying he would pay for half of it and that he was sorry, I lost it on him. I got up and started screaming and cursing at him for his laziness and saying how much of a bastard he was for letting me down after I trusted him. I called him a loser, and I told him I should have left him ages ago. Then I started walking around my place with a garbage bag and tossing in anything of his I could find. He was following me around, still insisting that I was overreacting and that I just needed to chill out. When I was done gathering his stuff, I shoved the bag at him and told him to get the hell out of my house. That's when he grabbed my shoulders and told me I was acting crazy, and that Chloe was just a dog. I had never done something like this in my life and I never will again, but I was in shock over seeing Chloe like that, and I just had so much resentment for Dave at that moment. He wouldn't let me go when I tried to get out of his grasp, so I brought my hand back and gave him a hard slap across the face. After that, he started cursing me out and even said he wished the car had unalived Chloe as he stormed out of my house. It was one of the most stressful nights I have ever experienced, and I have spent every day trying to comfort Chloe and make her as comfortable as possible. I should have stayed with him that long, and I'm a fool for leaving my innocent baby in his care. He even texted me after he left saying he was going to sue me for the vet bills. I can't believe I was ever dating someone so cruel and careless.
What made you straight up nope out of a relationship? After maybe 2 years of him constantly trying to make me jealous, we temporarily had a 16 hours time difference as I was traveling home to see my grandparents, when I was asleep for maybe 7 hours, because well, it was nighttime, and I had not responded to his 50 texts. He finally said he was going to spend time with other girls for 7 hours that day. BC, that's how long I was probably going around spreading legs. Lol, I'd cry, but at that moment it was like a moment of clarity, and I just replied okay, blocked him, his family, and all his friends, and just moved on. She picked me because I had the same first name, general appearance, and lived in the same area of the state as her ex-fiancé, of 2 years, that she had just been dumped by a month before we met. I felt even more offended about all of that than just being straight up rejected.
I ruined a marriage. When I was 20 working at a gas station, we got a new manager who really liked me. I got the best shifts, all the free snacks, and got a raise for no reason. When I was just in doing stocking one day, I went into the cooler, put my headphones in, and went to work organizing everything, only to feel a hand on my back. Scared the shite out of me, and it was her. I took out my headphones and asked her what she needed me to, only to end up being kissed. I knew she was married and what I was doing was wrong, but I didn't want it to stop. She took me to the bank to deposit bills, and that's when everything happened. We didn't stop after just once, and no one knew for almost 8 months, until her daughter went on the family laptop and asked the husband where her mom's bazookas are on the screen. I knew better, and I feel bad for her kids to now have to deal with all of this. This is the first time I've ever talked about it, and I need to say it because it's been eating me up. I know I'm the a-hole, but I needed to say it. How did you turn your passion into a successful business? I turned my woodworking hobby into a effing successful business. It all started when I was in high school and took a shop class where I discovered my passion for working with wood. Even though I went down other career paths after college, my love for woodworking never faded. Fast forward to when me and the wife bought our first house, an old-ass 1920s place with some beautiful hardwood flooring that needed some TLC. Instead of replacing it, we decided to refinish it ourselves to keep its character. My wife, being an artist, brought her creative flair by designing unique patterns for each room. While she excelled at sketching these designs, she relied on me to bring them to life. With our flooring project underway, we were unstoppable. We refinished the main floor, then moved on to the bedrooms, and eventually tackled the basement rec room, guest bedroom, and office space. It took us about 2 years since we worked on it gradually whenever we could afford it. By this point, my wife had designed every room in our house except for the kitchen, which presented an exciting challenge. She asked if I would be willing to take on this project, as it would require more skill than what we had done before so far, so of course I said yes. Over 4 years later, after pouring our energy into this project, and overcoming all its complexities, we built a effing beautiful kitchen that was both functional and aesthetically pleasing too. As people noticed our craftsmanship, they began inquiring about where they could find similar work for their own homes, but when they found out how much it cost, they usually hesitated. That's when I realized there was potential here beyond just personal projects. In March/April 2019, after completing our kitchen remodel, my wife finalized her dream kitchen design, combining ideas from previous drawings, her experience designing other rooms, plus inspiration from various sources. We meticulously outlined materials and costs in an Excel spreadsheet, accounting for taxes, shipping fees, installation expenses, etc. The result showed that the project was financially feasible, so encouraged by this realization, I began thinking beyond personal projects and saw potential here for something bigger. I took pride in what me and the wife had created and realized others appreciated us too, so that's how my journey from being a carpenter started turning into starting up my own woodworking business. Nowadays I work on various projects, bringing clients' visions alive with wood creativity and craftsmanship. It's fulfilling seeing how far things have come since starting out as just a hobby. What is the darkest family secret you have discovered accidentally? That I'm probably a cannibal. Let me explain. My father wasn't around in my life, but my mother raised me well with her meager earnings and with the close guidance of my grandparents. My grandmother is still alive to this day and has to be the kindest, most wholesome person I have ever known. My grandfather was this badass country man. I grew up as a toddler watching old Clint Eastwood films, and I thought he was Clint Eastwood for while he looks a lot like him. He was my father figure, and taught me about hunting and fishing. He was a Depression-era kid and made sure we never went without and that we knew how to keep ourselves alive. As I grew older, I found out my granddad had did time and was actually a felon, and all the times we went hunting he could have been sent away for illegal weapon possession. He did time over crippling a dude at a party with a crowbar. I don't know all the specifics, something spurred on by drink. He was a rowdy man though, and very quiet, mumbled a lot, a habit I had to grow out of as I got older. He had his Adam's apple caved in during a bar fight and always had a raspy Daffy Duck tone to his voice. To sum it up, my grandfather wasn't exactly a saint. This isn't entirely about him though, as it gets much darker. My granddad had a group of friends he did redneck tough with, like hunting and fishing. By the time he was gone, the only one left alive in the group was the youngest friend and closest. We called him Texas. Texas was by far the most redneck person I ever met. Big 10-gallon hat, no shirt, and a Bowie knife on his waist just about everywhere he went. My granddad died off when I was in my mid-teens, and Texas took over in showing me the way. Man's man he was, smart man too, philosophy, art, music. He wasn't a one-trick pony. One heck of a cook too. Annually since before I was born, we had 4th of July parties at his house where barbecue and catfish were served in abundance alongside a spectacular fireworks display of illegal fireworks brought in from states away, all in his backyard. Our story takes a dark turn and a family secret is revealed to me one night before one of my last hunting trips. It was right before an unexpected heart attack sent Texas to an early grave. As old men do on the weekends, Texas was drinking when my mom dropped me off at his house. I was gonna stay over, and then we were gonna hit the land early in the morning. As soon as mom left, Texas threw me a beer and we got to sitting around chatting with another friend of his. Eventually his friend leaves and things turn somber as Texas reflects on my granddad and how he missed him and how he thinks my granddad would really be proud of how I had been doing in life up till then. I asked him to tell me some stories about the good old days, and he shared a couple of tales about situations they got into doing one thing or another. Texas was a big and broad-shouldered man and had to pay court fees once for beating up 4 bouncers at a bar in Indiana. Stories like that were told. And then he lets this line slip out, I will never forget it. See, there's a lot of bad in this world, your granddaddy and I both knew that. Sometimes when we encountered bad folk, we made them disappear. You'd be surprised how much people taste like barbecue when done right. I had laughed it off having been a few beers deep at this point thinking it to have been a joke. However, years after his passing, remains were found in his backyard. The same backyard where we had the 4th of July cookouts for years. Where barbecue was served often.
I'm afraid my ex is making the biggest mistake of his life. I've, 26 female, been in a relationship for 8.5 years. It may be weird to say, but those were the best years of my life. We never fought, we always talked about our problems and struggles with each other and we loved and cherished each other, or so I thought. We both had difficult lives before we found each other. He, 26 male, was depressed and I was mentally abused by my dad, which scarred me for a long time. We pulled each other out of our difficult situations and became better people. We experienced a lot of good things, but also some really bad ones. He was there for me when my mom passed away last year. It was difficult, but we pulled through and we talked even more about our plans for the future. We planned a meeting with a shelter to see if we could adopt a cat. The night before we would see if the cat was a match for us. We even talked about our future plans with my family, house, kids, marriage, etc. The next morning, he broke up with me. He told me he never had feelings for me, but thought he did. Now he had developed feelings for his best friend, a girl from another country who he met online about 10 years ago and met in person twice. He realized his feelings when she stayed with us about 3 weeks ago and realized how different he felt about me and our relationship. 3 weeks after our breakup, he's planning to go to her and make the relationship official. My friends and family are pissed at my ex for the way he treated me and I fully agree with them. He never told me anything was wrong and even kept bringing up plans for our future. He never even thought about relationship therapy and he's moving on way too fast. It's like those 8.5 years didn't mean anything to him. We talked a lot about it and I learned that the new girl and his future plans don't align at all. For example, he always wanted a lot of kids but she doesn't want any. Every time he spoke of his plans it sounds more and more unrealistic to me. I think sooner or later he'll realize he wants different things in life. His family, the ones who do know about the new girl, want to support him but also think he's making a huge mistake. Even so, I'd like to stay in his life, even as just a friend. However, I will not take him back if he ever realizes he made a mistake. Right now I'm living at my mom's old house, which now belongs to me and my brother. With my inheritance, I will be lucky enough to buy myself a house soon. Hopefully, I'll be adopting a cat as well. My husband's anger issues are affecting our kids more than I thought they would. My 11-year-old daughter's words broke my heart today. While teary-eyed, she asked, "How can you still be in love with someone like that?" Referring to her dad. Then she started crying. My son, 9, was sitting across from her and started crying too. This is right after my husband came out of the hallway looking and acting very angry with a wooden paddle and seeing the baby had changed the channel from the football game he was watching. My husband does have a slight temper. He has punched a hole through our bedroom door, replaced the door, and punched another hole. The kids saw this. I didn't realize how strongly the kids feel about his behavior. As far as tonight's episode goes, it didn't seem extreme to me. I understood he was stressed from work, our dog peeing and pooping everywhere, our AC being broken for a couple days, us suffering from heat, and so he used a wooden paddle on my daughter who was being way too loud playing video games in her room. When I told my husband the kids are scared of you, can you please apologize to them? He said good, mission accomplished. They should be scared of one of us. I don't know what to make of that. Was he being sarcastic or serious? This conversation happened while he was feeding the baby. The baby kicked his food and stuck his foot in the bowl. This caused my husband to slap the baby's leg. And it was a really hard slap. The baby started crying, of course. My husband actually left fingerprints and the skin bruised. When my son saw that, along with hearing him say good, he started crying. I asked my son if he wanted to write down what he was feeling since he wasn't able to voice it at the moment. He wrote down, "He always hurts the baby and hurts the dog and hurts us and he never cares about us. He only cares about himself." I feel sad when I read that. I felt heartbroken for my son feeling this way, but also confused. I know my husband loves us, spends time with us. Overall, I thought he was a great dad. His anger has never been directed at us. He doesn't always hurt the baby. This was maybe the 3rd time. Since I was a little confused, I asked my son what he meant by doesn't care about us. My son said Dad makes jokes when we feel sad or are hurt. I don't know what to do. My kids are wondering why I'm still with my husband. I feel like my head was buried in the sand. How did I not notice their feelings? I thought we have an amazing and loving family. I know my husband won't go to therapy because if I've ever mentioned it in the past, he's just rolled his eyes. I'm honestly scared of putting my kids in therapy because of what they'll say. There is no physical mistreatment in my eyes, but the way my son views it, it seems like it's very extreme.
Am I the a-hole for making a joke about my brother's divorce? My wife Elle and I have been married for a year now. Back in the day, Elle worked as a sports model. Her job required her to meet a very rigid beauty standard and look a certain way. She was always on a strict diet and was severely underweight. Since then, she's gained a healthy amount of weight and muscle, and is much happier. My brother, Chris, is wealthy, like extremely wealthy. He's done well for himself and seems happy about where he is in life. He's just got out of a nasty divorce with his ex-wife and is asked to stay with me for a few weeks as he moves into his new place. Chris, to put it simply, has a type. He believes that every woman should subscribe to his type. Any woman who doesn't fit his preference is automatically ugly and unlovable. He wants all women to conform to his standards, hell or high water. 2 days ago, Chris found some of Elle's old magazine covers and commented on how beautiful she was back then. It's a harmless comment, sure, but he kept bringing up how much she's let herself go. I mean, kept bringing it up. Elle goes for a run every evening and as she was heading out the door, Chris told her to run fast enough to lose all the flabby bits. She rolled her eyes and laughed it off, but I told him to shut up. The next day, when Elle went to the gym, he told her to make sure to return to her old figure. Again, I told him to shut up and stop fixating on my wife's body. Despite all his comments, Elle is a little unfazed by all of it. She says that she's used to it. By the end of the day, I was completely exhausted from listening to him. I was at my end, but Elle again brushed him off with a smile and with a laugh. When Elle served him food, he made a joke about paying for her tummy tuck so that I can marry the right version of Elle. The right version is the skinnier version of her. That comment set me off. I told him that his wife married the wrong version of him, and to pack his shit and leave my house. He did not take kindly to this, and complained about how insensitive I was to his situation and how I made a low blow. He eventually left, but Elle tells me that I could have kicked him out without the comment. Am I the a-hole?
Redditors who work in hospitals, who was the rudest patient you ever encountered? Not a patient, but to this day, this man was one of the rudest, most entitled people I've ever come across while working as a nurse. I work at a hospital in the intensive care unit, ICU. My managers are great at arranging patient assignments, making sure we can focus on those who need the most care. In the ICU, we usually have 2 patients, and we're trained for emergencies. But on the tele floor, nurses have more patients, usually 6, and they handle tasks and priorities. At the start of my shift, I checked on my less sick patient, who was doing well and waiting to be moved to another part of the hospital. I told her I'd be back around 9 p.m. unless she needed something. This would give me time to take care of my sicker patient next door. But things got worse when the patient in room 1 had a serious problem, and the medical team rushed in to help. They were doing CPR, and everyone was working hard. I was busy managing medications, helping with the breathing tube, and making sure everything was going okay. In the middle of this emergency, the patient in room 2 pressed the call button. I couldn't go to her right away because of the urgent situation in room 1. Her boyfriend came out into the hallway where I was. I asked if everything was okay, and he didn't say much but tried to get me to come into the room. When I finally had a moment to check on room 1, I saw that things were stable for the time being. So, I asked the patient in room 2 what she needed. To my surprise, she said, "Can you get my Uber Eats order? It just arrived downstairs." I was really surprised and annoyed. I tried to explain that I was dealing with a critical patient and suggested that her boyfriend could go get the food for her. But he said he didn't want to. I couldn't believe it. I had to explain that everyone on the team was focused on saving a life, and none of us could leave. I even offered to get some crackers for him instead. Finally, he sighed, got up reluctantly, and said he'd go get the food. As he left, he complained loudly on the phone about how the nurses were rude and wouldn't even get food for the patients. The worst part was that the patient had just recovered from a diabetic coma and needed special care. I've never met someone so selfish and thoughtless, who cared more about their food delivery than someone else's life.
My best friend's fiancé asked me to not attend their wedding and cut my friend off. I, 28, have known my best friend Jack, 28, since preschool. We become best buddies. He came from a wealthy family, has amazing parents, they are so sweet. I on the other hand not. My mom was a single mother. My dad committed before I was born. My mom then became an alcoholic. She goes to work then comes home and drinks all night. She never cared for me. She lost her life in a car accident after she passed out on the road. I was 15 at the time. Jack's parents took me and they became my foster parents. I loved them so much, they were always there for me. Jack was always there for me in everything. He was when I had problems with my mother, when I was depressed, when I was sick, happy, angry, my first heartbreak. He was always here, and his parents rented an apartment for us in college. Jack even left the college. He wanted to come to mine. I love him so much I would die for him. I see him as a brother, one that I love so much, nothing more, never looked him any other was. He was the brother I never had. I see him as mine twin. But he has had the biggest crush on me. He never confessed, never made a move on me or anything, but I have seemed to notice how he felt. While playing Truth or Dare, a friend asked if I would date Jack. I laughed it off and said no, not in a million years. Jack is my brother and that is disgusting. Jack also started laughing with me. I have made it clear I never seen him that way without actually telling him I know he likes me. I think it will just be awkward and I don't want to lose him. I have been in a serious relationship with one guy for 4 years, but we broke up about a year ago and it had nothing to do with Jack. All the guys never really cared since they know how I feel about him. Jack has never really dated anyone, just hookups and maybe for 2 months and they are over, but he has dated Sophia for 3 years now. He proposed a year and 5 months ago. They have been planning the wedding and I have been with them in the planning. I am one of the groom women. Since I am not close with Sophia, Jack would always ask my opinion in things. It's been like that since forever. I noticed Sophia did not like that, so I kept myself away, making excuses. I can't come along for some of the plans. Their wedding is the 10th, which is in 2 days. Sophia called and asked me to meet with her and we did at the park. She told me not to come to the wedding because she knows if Jack sees me he will not go along with the wedding. I told her she is crazy. Jack loves her and he has no feelings for me. She told me everybody knows how he feels about me and I let him go or date him. I told her I will never date him. He is my brother, maybe not by blood, but he is still my brother. She asked me to stay away from them because the moment she marries him she will make him cut me off. I am okay with that as long as he is the one to do that. If he is happy I will be happy for him, but I will not upset him at his wedding by not going. She also asked me to stay away from his parents, and that is when I got mad and told her they are also my parents and I will not leave them just because she doesn't want me there. If she is scared of me she shouldn't marry Jack, and I left. I really don't know what to do. He is my brother and they are my parents. I don't want to cut them off, but I also really like Sophia for him. She is really sweet and an amazing girl. I am now planning not to go, but I don't know how Jack will feel is the right thing to do.
What's the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? 1991, I'm 19, just signed the lease for my first, solo, apartment, just got the first paycheck from my new job. I deposit the paycheck at an ATM, another first. I'd always gone into the bank to do it. 2 weeks later, I get my bank statement in the mail, and see with horror I have only $1.87 in my account. Way wrong, I should have at least $200. I've been very careful with my spending. I'm freaked. I came within $2 of bouncing my first rent check. I'm literally reaching for the phone to call the bank when the phone rings. It's the police, asking if my ATM card was stolen. I check my wallet and the card is missing. My job at a theater pub came with cash tips, so I didn't use the card often. And tell them I was going to call them anyway because I was missing $200 from my account. Well, we've got your card, and your $200, so come down to the police station, they tell me. I can't figure out how they have my card and the cash. Doesn't make sense. I drive down there. Detective says someone, let's call him Bob, pulled in to use an ATM and saw a man acting suspiciously while he was using it, moving back and forth as if trying to dodge the camera. Bob says the man then left the ATM, got into a car, and drove away at high speeds as if fleeing. Bob then went to the ATM and put his card in, which popped out. Bob then withdrew $200, and then another ATM card popped out. My card. Bob's card had popped out because the crook had left my card in the ATM before speeding away. Bob realized he had withdrawn the money from my account and not his, so he brought my card and the cash to the police and reported the attempted theft. The detective gives me the description of the crook. According to Bob, it was a man 5'7", brown hair, round gold-rimmed glasses. I say out loud so, about my height, my color hair, and glasses like mine, before realizing Bob was describing me. I'd never deposited a check in an ATM before, so I was moving back and forth, following the instructions on the screen, filling out the envelope with my account number, punching the amount in, etc. I then forgot to take my card out and just left because I'm a effing idiot. I drove away at high speeds because I was 19 and that's how I drove everywhere. Worried the detective might be annoyed, I didn't tell him I was the crook. I just thanked him and left with the money I stole from myself. Somewhere in a box in my closet I still have the police report where I'm both the victim and the perp.
What is the most obvious sign a couple won't last long? If they don't trust their partners. I've always been conventionally attractive, so a lot of guys don't want me around their partners. However, the only time guys have ever come near me was when they wanted to test something out. They'd tell me a long sob story about how their girlfriend is acting weird or distant and beg me to text them to see if they'll text back. The first time someone asked me to do this, I was hesitant to, but they offered a huge amount of cash just for 3 texts, so I did it. I texted their girl and I got a response pretty quickly. It was casual at first, until our back and forth conversation interested her enough that she asked me if I wanted to go on a date with her. I sent a screenshot to her boyfriend and he was so grateful he sent me an extra $100. Supposedly he'd been asking her if she was cheating for months and she kept telling him that he was crazy. I guess this guy spread it around, because I started getting requests to loyalty test their girlfriends too. I didn't really want to keep messing with relationships, but every guy offered good money and I was going broke because of my gambling habits. So, every time a guy texted me I went on my dutiful way to text their girlfriends. I even set up a second social media page for the guys to text me on, so that the girls wouldn't suspect them. The usual text I'd get was about a paranoid boyfriend and a friendly girlfriend. But sometimes, the guy wants to propose but isn't sure if his girlfriend is as faithful as it seems. That's where I come in. What I say depends on what the girls like, but I usually start out with something basic like how do you feel about guys that make the first move. In my line of work, I've learned that 100% of girls prefer if a guy makes the first move, and this always interests them enough to reply. Immediately, I know that if they text back then they're not loyal, but my client would want more proof than that, so I keep the conversation going. So, I lead into asking where they're from because I want them to think we're from the same area. That way, I can ask her to meet up. Then, I make up some lame excuses like, I'm going to college there, or I have an internship in that state. I ask them if they could show me around, and they always say yes. That's when I drop the bomb and ask if they're single. They say yes and then they give me their number. Usually, it only takes 20 minutes for a girl to fold for me. They love to entertain the idea of seeing someone else, and don't shut down any of my advances like the boyfriend hopes they do. Though, there have been 2 girls who have rejected me in favor of their boyfriends, but for some reason, the relationship shortly failed after and I'd get a quick text in the middle of the night from the girls. But that's not even the craziest part. The thing is, I'm not even the one texting them. I've gotten a lot of money texting these girls, but I'm actually using an AI, so I put no real effort and they always fall for my tricks. None of the girls realize that they're falling for automated messages because of how casual and flirty the AI is. It sounds like a person is actually writing these texts. The best part though, is that the AI gives me the perfect location to take the girls to, no matter where they are. So, if a girl isn't falling for my usual tricks, I hit them with my trump card to make sure they're actually loyal. I tell them I'll take them out for a date to the best places near them. Girls love being spoiled, so if they reject the date, which they usually don't, that's how I really know how faithful she is. And if you're wondering how I present myself on social media that has girls who have never met me falling for me, I use the AI to make my profiles perfect. I give it a couple pictures to choose from, and it always gives me the ones where I look my best. But sometimes, looks aren't enough, so I use the AI to craft a bio for me that intrigues the ladies. I know a girl is checking out my profile when they text me asking me stuff I have written down on my bio. And if my bio catches their attention like I hope it does, they always stick around for the pictures I post. This plays a huge part in them falling for the loyalty test. But since I have to text a lot of girls and each one of them have different interests, it gets hard to think of what to say that will make them continue talking to me, so I always have the AI on hand to help me out. It never lets our conversations die down since it always knows what to say, and I can always choose how I want it to respond. Whether that be flirty, nerdy, or casual, etc., it all depends on the girl, but I'm getting paid either way. This started out as a side hustle, but now it's like my own small business, and it sure is a steal. So if you want to see if your girlfriend is cheating on you, just hit me up. I got you. Edit. For those asking me what AI I use an app called Pickup Pal for everything. It's the only dating assistant I've seen that has all the features I need. Update 2. My girlfriend had a meltdown and fell asleep on my couch. She took a mental health leave from her job and found a therapist this morning who she says will begin to see her next week. She got her medication refills on Thursday and has been trying to relax, but when I came home later that day she was not there. I texted her and she said she was out with friends and would be back soon. She came back a couple hours later with a brown bag but did not tell me what it was. She went into my bedroom to hide it and told me not to open it. I was a little concerned but decided not to push it. It turns out she was hiding blow in the bag. I am a firefighter and I worked today and the next 2 days, and tonight she showed up at my station drunk and high out of her mind. She knocked on the door and my lieutenant opened it and I immediately recognized her intoxicated voice. She stumbled in asking where I was and started crying when she saw me. My lieutenant told me to take her home, so I guided her to the car and drove her back to my apartment. She started yelling about her job out of nowhere, then fell asleep. When I reached my apartment I carried her up the stairs and sat her down on the couch. There were wine bottles and a line of blow on my kitchen counter. I called the station and said I would be back in an hour and cleaned up the kitchen and made sure she was not at risk of taking too much. I have never been more mad in my life. I am okay with alcohol in my apartment, but any kind of drugs is unacceptable. My father was an addict, so drugs are forbidden from my apartment and my girlfriend knows this. I am upset about that, but showing up inebriated and high at my job in front of my coworkers is even more unacceptable. I have been trying my hardest to put myself in a position to move up a rank, and now I am the guy who had to drive his intoxicated girlfriend home. How did she even get to the station in the first place? I hope it was an Uber or something. I love my girlfriend with all my heart, but she needs to find serious professional help. I have been able to weather her manic episodes, but this incident is something I am not going to be able to let go quickly. I know she has mental health problems and it's something I have to accept to be with her, but she is not taking her health seriously and it's affecting her life, and it's starting to affect my life. She said she was going to admit herself to a psychiatric hospital on Thursday, but it's Saturday morning and she's in my apartment passed out on my couch. I love my girlfriend. I really do. The past 4 years with her have been amazing, but she keeps getting worse and it's getting harder to help her. I watched my mother ruin her life trying to fix my father, and I don't want to end up on the same path as her. At some point I have to draw a line. Update. She took herself to the hospital and admitted herself. She sent me a picture of the sign-in sheet and apologized for her behavior. I don't feel anything at this point. I get a break from her for a while, so that's nice. I might break up with her.
Doctors of Reddit, what happened to a patient that will haunt you for life? I'm a PEDS emergency medicine doc. We see a lot: child abuse, horrible accidents, cruel diseases, stupid decisions leading to life-altering consequences. The worst are just senseless deaths that shouldn't have happened, but did. I had a young teen brought in by ambulance in full cardiac arrest. She was in gym class, and had some trouble breathing. She had wheezed once as a child, but hadn't used an inhaler in well over a decade. She was an athlete, in amazing physical shape. The school called an ambulance and she was struggling to breath when they arrived. Lights and sirens en route to the ED, but before they arrived she vomited and then aspirated, breathed the vomit back in, and her heart stopped. CPR in progress on arrival. My resident doctor intubated her, breathing tube, and the ET tube just filled up with vomit. We did everything, and her heart just never moved. I will never forget the look on the resident's face when he asked me if there was anything else we could do. There wasn't. She died. A completely healthy teenager with zero medical issues kissed her family goodbye one morning and they next saw her dead on a ED stretcher.
A whole daughter ruined my anniversary, so I abandoned her and her kids. My wife and I have always dreamed of celebrating our 40th anniversary with a luxurious vacation. Just the two of us, reliving the romance of our early years. We had it all planned out for years now and we're excited beyond words. Enter our adult daughter Jane. Jane and her husband got wind of our plans and promptly invited themselves and their 2 children along. I originally put my foot down and told them this trip was just for us, which upset her some. But my wife has a hard time saying no to Jane, as she is the youngest of our children and our only daughter, and she didn't want to hurt her feelings, so she reluctantly agreed to let them join. I wasn't thrilled about it at the time, but I wanted to make my family happy, and I knew my wife was also okay with the idea of a family trip even if she was heartbroken we wouldn't get our romantic trip. We went along with it. The place we were originally going was not child-friendly, so we changed course and decided on an all-inclusive family-friendly resort. We paid for the resort and our grandchildren's plane tickets. Jane and her husband only had to pay for their own airfare. Here's where things get complicated. As the vacation got closer, I started having a change of heart. I realized that our 40th anniversary was a once-in-a-lifetime milestone, and I wanted to honor it in a way that was true to our original plans. My wife and I might not be able to afford a trip like this again for quite some time, and it's something we always wanted to do. So, without consulting anyone, I switched our tickets last minute to go to the romantic destination that my wife and I had originally planned for. I did not tell Jane or her husband. I didn't even tell my wife until the day before our flight left, which was a day before Jane's flight left for their vacation. It wasn't an easy decision and I feel guilty about it. But I wanted our 40th anniversary to be the special, intimate celebration we had always hoped for. We called Jane after we landed to tell her and she was extremely upset to say the least. She seemed to think that we were going to look after our grandkids so she and her husband could have alone time, and now that I abandoned her they would have to do it all themselves. I hung up on them when my son-in-law started shouting and my wife and I enjoyed the rest of our trip. They came back the same day we did but have not answered any of our texts and Jane seems to be ignoring me. My wife told me she vastly preferred our trip to the family trip we would have taken, but she still doesn't like how Jane is mad at us and wants me to apologize. I'm not sure I want to after learning Jane and her husband were using us for free babysitting and a free trip, but I feel like I should just to keep the peace. The girl I delivered food to gave me a glass of cold water as soon as I arrived. So I'm a delivery guy, and my vehicle of choice is a bicycle. Today I had a delivery 3 kilometers away from the restaurant, which may not seem like a long way, but it really is in this hot weather. Anyway, I arrived to the address, and as soon as I came, the girl who ordered the food came out with a crispy glass of cold water and told me that she had seen me on the bicycle and thought I'd like some water. Honestly, this may not be such an interesting story, but it was one of the most wholesome experiences I've had in my life. Today was a bit rough for me and this girl absolutely made my day. If you're reading this, thank you so much, Water Girl. My faith in humanity is restored. What made your day today?
I tried to surprise my teenage son but he cried. My son and I just moved into our new place a few days ago after struggling with being unhoused and living in my truck for a while. I thought that it would be a nice surprise, so I didn't tell him after finally saving up enough to get us a place. I will never forget the look on his face when we walked in and I told him that it's our new home and that we don't have to sleep in the car anymore. I thought that he would excitedly lose his mind considering how much he had been patiently dreaming of that moment. He timidly asked if it's really ours, and when I assured him that yes it is, he just started crying. It was gut-wrenching. I gave him a bear hug and told him to let it all out. I felt so bad when he thanked me for being able to get the place. As a parent, you are supposed to be able to provide your kids with a roof over their heads. It is the absolute bare minimum. I have been feeling and still do feel guilty for putting him through that in the first place. He is my only kid and I just felt like I couldn't guarantee that he was okay if he wasn't with me, even though our situation was extremely hard. After getting over the initial emotions, he seemed pretty happy and we had pizza on the floor and excitedly talked about everything and how we want our new home to look. He seems okay now, but I still can't get over the fact that this whole experience probably scarred him for life, and it is highly likely that I will be shipped off to a nursing home when I'm old and frail.
Steal my dog? You'll never see your son again. I have a crazy mother-in-law. She hated me from pretty much the moment she saw me, always believing that I wasn't good enough for her precious son. However, my husband loves me to the ends of the earth, so I always tried not to let it get to me. This time, though, she went too far. Basically, my husband is obsessed with animals. He once worked as a part-time groomer, and now, our house looks like a walk-in veterinarian's clinic. Among other animals, we have 3 dogs. My husband recently picked up the 3rd dog from a shelter, and she is a very scared, very sensitive creature. However, my husband had to go visit his mentally ill brother for the weekend, so he left me in charge of all his animals, even though he's usually their primary caretaker. I work from home, so this wasn't much of an issue. I made sure to take extra watch of the new puppy to make sure she felt safe and loved, and everything was fine until yesterday. The puppy disappeared. At first, I thought the puppy just got scared again. But when I checked her usual hiding spots, she was nowhere. I was worried that she'd escaped, but the doors were locked and our yard is fenced. Still, she was somehow gone. Horrified that I'd somehow lost the animal, I called my husband and told him the truth. I was hoping he would know what to do, but he just started shouting at me because he couldn't believe I would be so irresponsible, especially when the puppy was new to our home. Still panicking, I told my neighbors what had happened. Fortunately, the neighbor who lives across from me found footage in her cameras of my dogs, but what she showed me was shocking. The video feed clearly caught my mother-in-law entering the house with the key we gave her for emergencies. She then left my home with my terrified and squirming puppy in tow. I was furious. The first thing I did was download and forward the footage to my husband. The second thing I did was drive 3 hours to my mother-in-law's house. When she opened the door, I didn't even wait for her to speak. I just started shouting at her, asking how she could possibly think it was appropriate to literally steal the dog. By the time I was done lecturing, both her and her husband were sitting on the couch, silent and apologetic. That's when they meekly explained that they did this not to torment me or anything, but because they thought my husband would see me for the woman I really was if I lost his new rescue puppy. I will say, I went speechless at that. I finally just asked them where the heck the dog was. Apparently, they were keeping her downstairs. The poor girl was terrified when she saw me, but I was so relieved to see her again that I ignored my in-laws entirely and just drove home. I called my husband on the way and told him everything. Because of this, and his deep care for his dog, we're finally going no contact with his crazy parents. They won't be seeing him, me, or our dog again. Good riddance. What's something you can't believe you had to explain to another adult? This happened to me about 20 years ago when I still lived in Alabama. I needed a little cash, so I drove to my bank to pick some up during business hours. This was quite a few years before any of our local banks had automated tellers. I used the drive-thru where I wrote a personal check to cash for $50, if I remember correctly. I then gave the check and my identification, my passport, as I had lost my driver's license a couple days before, to the teller. The teller, let's call her Charlotte, takes my passport, looks at it and, over the intercom, says to me, as though very probably dealing with an idiot, "Sir, I'm gonna need a valid photo identification." I don't even know what this here is. Imagine Dolly Parton doing a parody of her own southern accent. I tried my best not to seem a condescending prick and replied, "That's my passport issued by the United States Department of State. I can assure you that it is a valid form of photo identification. Just look at it. There's a US flag and a picture of an bald eagle and everything." "Well, be that as it may, I'm gonna need a driver's license or something, otherwise I can't give you no cash." She insists. "What you have there is most definitely something. Perhaps you should confer with one of your colleagues or even a manager." I suggest, "Betty, can you come over here and look at this?" She asks of one of her colleagues. This gentleman claims that this is a valid photo identification. "Do you even know what this is?" Betty looks at me and says, "Sir, we're gonna need a valid form of photo identification like a driver's license or something." I give the classic two-handed facepalm and, after a long-suffering sigh, I say it's a passport. It's issued by the United States government to U.S. citizens who generally use them to travel abroad, and it is definitely a valid government-issued photo ID. By this time a third teller, let's call him Carl, is involved. I think it's one of those things you use to go to foreign country or something. He says to Charlotte and Betty, he looks at me, "Sir, this is a bank. It ain't no airport. We're going to need a valid photo identification like a driver's license or something." At this point I'm no longer trying to avoid being a condescending prick when I ask, "Can one of you ignorant savages fetch a manager? Preferably one that's traveled beyond the borders of the great state of Alabama." After a round of well-I-nevers, Betty takes off in a huff to retrieve the bank manager. When he arrives, Charlotte looks at me smugly and says, "Bill, this gentleman wants withdraw cash, but he doesn't have valid photo identification. He only has this." And with this she presents Bill, the bank manager, with my passport. Bill looks at me sheepishly and there is an audible click as the intercom shuts off. Because of this I didn't hear exactly what Bill said to Charlotte, Betty, and Carl, but judging from their body language and the way their eyes all drifted downward I would guess it was none too kind. Then a click as the intercom springs back to life and Bill says, "Please allow me to apologize, Mr. Estes. I promise you that nothing like this will ever happen again. Would 2 20s and a 10 be okay? Am I the a-hole for making a pregnancy jar? My husband and I have been married for 6 years. Still don't have kids, we want them but it's still not happening. Friends and family are causing us constant stress about having a baby soon, but it's obviously something we can't control. We only wish that they'd stop, but to no avail. So what I did was come up with an idea, stupid I know, and that is to have an empty jar and call it pregnancy jar. I carry it with me in my bag whenever I'm with friends and family, and every time someone asks when my husband and I are gonna have a baby, I pull my jar out and ask them to drop $1 in there for asking. I'd get puzzled looks, but they reach out for their pockets/wallets/purses and pull out $1 and put it inside the jar. It actually worked because most of them stopped asking after 4 months. Last week we had dinner at my parents' house. My brother came back from his business trip that lasted a month, and while we were eating he asked when me and my husband were going to have a kid. My husband paused. I got up from the chair and made my way to where my brother was sitting with my jar in my hand and asked him to drop $1 for the question he asked. He stared at me, then laughed nervously, asking if I was being serious. Everyone was looking at us. He said no, he didn't have to pay me, but I told him he didn't have to ask either, so here we are. I could tell he felt embarrassed. He immediately reached out to his pocket, pulled out his wallet and put $1 in my jar. I made my way back to my seat and sat down and resumed eating like nothing happened. It got awkward afterwards. Mom pulled me into the kitchen later to tell me that I embarrassed my brother in front of his wife and family and said I should quit acting childish by running around with a jar demanding others to put money in it. I told her they should quit asking then. She went on about how they're just worried for us since we are in mid-30s and don't have much time left if we want at least one healthy baby. I got upset and she started arguing. My husband and I left and we haven't seen them in days, except I got a call from my sister basically siding with mom and the others saying I'm being childish. So am I the asshole for this?
What's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? When I was a teenager, my family lived in a big 115-year-old brick house. Plenty of creepy stuff happened, but one night I was heading to bed when the door between the first floor kitchen and the basement stairs absolutely slammed shut. It had a unique sound that I recognized immediately as the kitchen basement door. There were no windows open that could have caused a draft. Our dog was asleep on the second floor. I was on the second floor. My parents were both asleep in the third floor attic, had been converted to a master bedroom. None of us could have shut the door. Effing terrified, I worked up the courage to go investigate, carrying my hilariously teeny pocket knife for protection. As I went downstairs I turned on every light. When I reached the kitchen, the door was wide open. Even more freaked out I ran back up to bed, leaving the lights on. A minute or two later, I heard a definite okay from downstairs. I laid in bed and was ready to accept my demise. Eventually I somehow fell asleep and in the morning I was there first downstairs. I woke up before my parents and dog, and found that the lights were all off and the basement door had been shut again.
I ducked my boyfriend's Jeep without him knowing because he was sad he hadn't got a duck yet. So the title probably sounds really odd, but let me explain. In the Jeep owners community, there is a thing called ducking. The term is, duck duck Jeep. Jeep owners leave a small rubber duck on another Jeep. Ducks are often left with a note, telling the owner they've been ducked and they have to pass the duck along. Jeep owners say it's a source of pride to find one of the ducks on their car. The trend has gained so much popularity lately and is often posted on Facebook groups for Jeep owners, and my boyfriend has told me about it many times. He's had a rough time lately with work and I just wanted to see him smile. I knew he wouldn't be ducked by another Jeep owner as there aren't many Jeeps in our area, but I knew it would make his day if he got one. So I purchased a rubber duck with some cool accessories and made a plan to leave it on his car. I even got my brother in on it so he wouldn't suspect it was me. The day came and my brother left the duck on the car as we went swimming, and he found it on our way back out. Guys, his face lit up. He even did a little happy dance, and wouldn't stop smiling the whole way home. As soon as we got home he was posting his duck in all the groups for other Jeep owners to see. He doesn't know it was me, and I don't have the heart to tell him. I want him to enjoy this little bit of happiness for as long as it lasts.
I asked my stepdaughter if she wanted to meet her biological mom and now I've shattered her world. My husband's ex abandoned him and the kids when they were 1M and 3F. She emptied their bank account. She took everything in their home and left him homeless. He had nowhere to go and lived with my brother for a while. I used to babysit the kids quite often. I have really good relationship with them. Both call mom and I love them so much. It's truly like I'm their mother, even though I'm not. They haven't seen their mom since she left. My husband hates his ex. He wants absolutely nothing to do with her. They never speak about their mom or even ask about her. They do know they have a different mother, but they've never asked anything about her. My husband received a card from his ex. He didn't want to read it and threw it out. I decided to open the envelope and it in short said that she would like to reconnect with the kids. Her phone number and email were on the bottom of the card. As a mom I felt sorry for her. It must be really painful to see your kids calling another woman mom. I don't want it to seem like I'm taking the place of their mother and completely erasing her existence. Maybe it's an insecurity I have, but I didn't want them to think I was maliciously keeping them away from their mom. So I just thought I'd ask them if they might want to meet their mother. I asked my stepdaughter if she remembered her mother. She then said that she of course remembers me. I asked her if she meet her biological mother. She got visibly upset and said that I was her real mother. I changed the subject after she got upset. She ignored it, and told me that I am her real mom and the only mom that she knows. She asked if I was going to leave them. She was in tears and I tried to console her, but she just pushed me away and went to her room. My husband is of course upset with me. He hasn't spoken to me properly in 2 weeks. I already apologized to my stepdaughter and reassured her I would never leave her or her brother. I also apologized to my husband. He just said I had good heart, but sometimes dumb and naive. He told me to stay out of anything regarding his ex, to only worry about raising our children. I thought he would be back to his usual self after our talk, but he's still so cold. I deeply regret my actions and just want my family to be a happy place again.
Ex-mother-in-law called CPS on me. My daughter is 23. The marriage between my ex and I turned incredibly toxic, mostly because of how involved my mother-in-law was in our relationship. My daughter was 14 when we separated, 15 when we divorced, and our court system permitted her to choose where she wanted to live. She chose me full-time and after some time refused to visit her mother or her grandmother. Looking back, I should have left earlier. Those last couple of years had a horrible impact on my child and she resorted to self-harm as a teen. Thankfully I noticed it quickly enough that we could get help, and she has been self-harm free for over 6 years, but she has always hated her scars. This brings us to last year. She approached me to ask me for advice on tattoos and if I would refer her to some artists that I know, so I did. She got a beautiful piece done which covers up everything she wanted to cover up. She was really excited and posted it on social media. Maybe a week after her tattoo was done, there was a knock on the door from a social worker. My daughter opened the door. The worker asked if I lived in that house and he asked to be let in to talk about some accusations that were filed against me. We sat down and he asked us where my daughter was. I pointed at her. No, he is looking for my 17-year-old daughter. I don't have a 17-year-old daughter. The worker asked, where's Jane Smith? Daughter pulls out her ID to show that is her name. We look confused, he looks confused. It took us a bit to figure out that the accusation that said that I forced my 17-year-old to get a tattoo without permission from the other parent was really about a 23-year-old getting a tattoo on her own. Poor worker is incredibly embarrassed and leaves. At this point, we have no clue who made the accusation, but there is a pretty limited pool of suspects that shrinks X meal, since we found her social media posts saying men not knowing how to raise children right. You are not an adult before you are 30 inches, and of course none of this would have happened if X were the one raising daughter. We moved to the other side of the country, my daughter changed her legal name, and everyone on that side of the family was blocked on everything possible. Men, what's the most ridiculous thing another man has done to assert his dominance over you? One night in college, my buddies and I were walking down the street around midnight. We were on a street of apartments and houses where only college kids lived. It was a warm Friday night, so lots of people were out drinking on patios, talking, and playing drinking games. Generally pretty chill. We're done pre-gaming at home and headed to a bar. We're walking down the road, and across the street, there are some people on a patio. They yell something at us. We weren't really listening, but the tone seemed friendly, something like, "Woo yeah, college bro." I kinda yell back, "Yeah, man, cool beans," and return to my conversation. Well, apparently, this guy does not like beans, regardless of temperature, because the next thing I hear is, "Did you just fucking say cool beans?" And see this perfect Skylar pop collar college bro storming off his porch to come across the street at us, looking like I just pissed in his natural piss light. I can only respond with a confused yeah? My group stops. This dude is crossing the street and running straight at us. It looks like he wants to fight. He came up to us all mad and yells, "Say it again, bro, what did you say?" A girl followed behind him was trying to calm him down. "Just let it go, Chad, they didn't mean it." My friend and I are all like, what the fuck at this point? I was so confused and just responded, "I said cool beans?" He was pissed and literally started flexing his muscles at us. "Get the fuck out of here, dude, before I kick your ass." I said, "Okay then, later bro." And we walked off as he stayed angrily flexing in the middle of the street while this girl is tugging his arm, trying to get him back to the house. We made it to the end of the block before my entire group just broke down laughing at the absurdity of it. Till this day I question it. I just don't understand it. Was it supposed to be a prank? Was he just a drunk dick looking to fight? Did he think I was intimidated? Did his whole family got killed in a freak chilled beans accident? I'm not sure. Either way, cool beans and did you just fucking say cool beans? Are still a standard farewell among the group of friends. My girlfriend is TikTok famous and I hate it. So for a bit of context, me and my girlfriend have been together almost 7 years. She was never super obsessed with social media or anything like that. Hardly posted, kept to herself and all that. Then she started to get hooked on TikTok. At first she didn't post, she would just watch it for hours and hours, but eventually ended up making an account and posted quite a lot. She never liked the idea of working for some corporate company, making someone else richer. She always wanted to be self-employed and I applauded that. Anyway, one day she'd posted a video and it was blowing up. And this is truly when she became obsessed. She started to tell me, "This is it, this is what I'm gonna do." I supported her unconditionally and told her that if the bills are paid, I couldn't give a damn what she did. At the time of writing this poster, followers are sitting in the millions. I don't know how many people are gonna read this, but I don't want to say exactly because I don't want anyone to find out who she actually is. A few problems are starting to arise. She earns good money, I can't fault her for that. She actually earns more than me and I'm by no means an average earner in the UK. For one, her health is starting to take a hit. She never eats properly. Don't sleep and all that. She is obsessed with numbers. If a TikTok or Instagram post performs badly, then she will be in a foul mood. It truly seems like the only hit of dopamine she can get is from her posts doing well. She's slowly turning into someone I don't know anymore and it's killing me. I'm lucky if I get half an hour a day where we have a normal conversation that doesn't regard her career. When we have arguments she also starts to call me working class scum and saying that I work for literal pennies. I just wish that she would be humble and more down to earth. This girl is not the person I fell in love with.
What is the most embarrassing way your body has betrayed you? I danced classical ballet for years when I was younger. One day when I was 12 we were doing a stretch where we were lying on our backs with our butts scooted to the wall and our legs stretched towards to the ceiling. We would let our legs fall into the splits letting gravity to assist us. So we were lying there, listening to quiet piano music, my legs wide open and the girl next to me was whispering jokes and making me giggle. I could feel the onslaught of explosive gas happening but being young and stupid I was afraid to close my legs because I thought I'd get in trouble. So I ripped the loudest, most terrifying fart to ever exist. I think I blew a hole in my little pink leotard, I swear to God. The room was a huge wooden studio so the fart from hell was bouncing off the walls for like 15 minutes. All the little girls started screaming, I was screaming, the teacher was probably screaming. Still gives me nightmare.
What is the best way to entertain yourself while sitting on the toilet? As a veteran of many toilet battles, I can confidently say that the best way to entertain yourself on the porcelain throne is by playing games on your phone. But not just any games. You need something that will keep your mind stimulated and your fingers moving, so that you don't lose focus on the main event. Personally, I like playing games where you have to attack and battle your way to victory. It's a great way to distract yourself from the fact that you're sitting on a toilet. One of my favorites is Clash of Clans. I love building my own village and training my troops to defend against invaders. It's like a mini military strategy game, and it really gets my adrenaline pumping. But if strategy games aren't your thing, there are plenty of other options. You could try a detective game, where you have to use your sleuthing skills to solve a crime. These games are great because they challenge your brain and keep you engaged. One of my favorites is Criminal Case. It's like being a detective in your very own crime lab. Of course, if you're not into games, there are other ways to pass the time. You could catch up on your reading, or listen to some music or a podcast. Some people even do work while they're sitting on the toilet, but I have to admit, I find that a bit gross. So there you have it, my top tips for entertaining yourself while on the toilet. Whether you're in senior high school or well into your golden years, these games and activities are sure to keep you engaged and distract you from the fact that you're sitting on a porcelain throne. Just be sure to wash your hands afterwards, you never know what kind of germs are lurking around. I told my mother-in-law that she's dead to me. For the past 3 months it's been a very well-known plan that when I, 30F, went into labor, my husband was going to drive me to the hospital and my mother-in-law was going to pick up my mother, my kids and my grandmother, all from one house. Both my mother-in-law and my mom were supposed to be in the delivery room. My gram was to watch my 2 kids in the waiting room. Everyone was in agreement with the plan. Now, my husband and I have 2 sons already and for both births, my mother was present. She helped me through so much of the mental anguish and panic, especially after my last whom literally almost killed me. I was bleeding out on the table and my mom was the only one able to keep me calm. I needed her to be with me with this baby too, mentally. So we worked this plan out months in advance and everyone was on the same page. However, I go into labor. We made the phone calls to mother-in-law and my mom, telling my mom to be ready and my mother-in-law to go get my mother. An hour and 15 minutes later, mother-in-law shows up at the hospital without my mom, my kids or my grandmother. She said well it's late so we need to just let everyone sleep. It was 9:30 p.m. and then sat her as down on the chair in the delivery room and jumped on her phone. I told her in a pissed off tone to go get my mom, that was the plan, I needed my mom, etc., and she just wouldn't. At one point saying that she didn't feel up to driving that much. My mom lives 20 minutes from her house, an hour away. So, I told her to get the F out of the room and that she was dead to me. The amount of resentment and disgust that I felt toward her at this moment is honestly not something I feel I will overcome anytime soon. She was pissed, saying that my mom got to experience 2 births already and how she didn't do anything wrong and she was just being respectful of people's sleep and where she wasn't leaving, she was actually escorted out. Now, my mom was able to make it to the hospital literally just as I was giving birth. My kids and my grandmother weren't able to make it, which bothers me a great deal. We promised our kids they would be the first to meet their sister, outside of us and Grammy. I cannot forgive my mother-in-law for this at all. I honestly feel like I hate her with every fiber of my being. But I'm being told I'm taking this too far and that it wasn't that big of a deal. Am I the a-hole? Medical professionals, what mistake have you made in your medical career that, because of the outcome, you've never forgotten? We were called out for an early 40s male with chest pain. We get there to see a healthy guy sitting in his car breathing hard. I get a history from his wife and an initial assessment of the patient. Doesn't have any history except for having anxiety problems and previously treated for excessive use for his anxiety meds. The patient described his symptoms as being just like when he has panic attacks. I hook him up to the monitor and everything looks fine. Slightly elevated heart rate but all of his other vitals seem to be within normal limits. I get him loaded into the ambulance and begin the 20-minute transport to the hospital. I start treating him with meds for the chest pain protocol and I start in 4. Then all hell breaks loose. He tells me his chest doesn't hurt anymore but he can't breathe. His vitals didn't line up with respiratory issues but I put him on high-flow oxygen just to be safe. As soon as I get the oxygen on him he starts losing it. He tells me he needs to get out of the ambulance. He starts standing up, ripping all the wires off of him, pulling the oxygen off, and even pulls his 4 out. I struggle with him to keep him on the gurney and calm him down. I start another 4, he pulls it out. I hook him back up to the monitor, he pulls it off. Same with the oxygen. The situation turns into me having to physically hold him down to keep him from jumping out of the ambulance on the freeway. I end up having to be pretty stern. I was yelling at him to sit down and stop fighting. I gave what little report I could to the hospital, holding the radio in one hand and his shirt collar in the other. All I could tell them was we had an agitated patient initially complaining of chest pain which has resolved, and now seemingly having a panic attack. I didn't use the words panic attack, because it isn't my place to diagnose, but the description of the situation spoke for itself. I had no current vitals to give them, cardiac rhythm, nothing. I couldn't even get him to keep in 4 in. When we finally get to the hospital we wheel him in, still holding him down. The moment we transfer him to the bed he goes from an agitated, fighting guy to a full cardiac arrest instantaneously. We worked him up in the ER bed for over 30 minutes. After the doc called time of death he came out of the room with us looking confused. I thought you were bringing in a panic attack. So did we. The doctor then hit us with a knock knock joke. He went knock knock. Who's there cardi who cardiac arrest? I just couldn't stop laughing. Then when I did I could not stop thinking that there was so much more I could have done for him had I been able to manage his anxiety. I was the last person to have a conversation with this guy and it consisted of me telling him to sit down aggressively. I dismissed his struggles, and told him he is all good and he is panicking for no reason like an autistic child. Those were the exact words out of my mouth. In my defense I was very tired.
My deadbeat dad is giving his second daughter the same name as me. Now, he's furious because I got my grandparents to stop him. My parents were young when they had me. My mom had no family of her own, and from the age of like 12, when she and my dad first got close, my dad's family became hers too. My parents dated all through high school and had me right after graduating. My mom died in her sleep when I was only 6 months old. She was 19. My dad was never interested in me, and he and my grandparents fought a lot from the time I was born to the time my mom died. They were disgusted with his lack of love or concern for me. They wanted him to be a better father than he was being, and apparently pointed out my mom was the same age as him and had stepped up. But he wasn't interested. After mom died, my grandparents were terrified that my dad would F me up. So they made a deal with him. They would get legal custody, they would raise me, and they would give him some money every month for him to do what he liked. I know it sounds strange, but they saw it as a way to keep him from me unless he was serious about being a dad. I never actually saw him at all when I was little. A couple of years ago I saw him from a distance for the first time. He had some woman with him. They later got married. I would see them around but decided to still keep my distance. His wife knew about me before they even married. Now they're having a baby girl, and my aunt was told by the wife that they wanted to name their baby Serenity, which is my name. She spoke to me about it because she wanted to warn me. The second I heard about this, I hated it. I saw so many issues because we would have the exact same name. I have no middle name, and my aunt said they had no plans to use a middle name either. Our last names would be the same too. Plus it felt like the sharing a name could be used by some people to push for me to be in the child's life. I asked my grandparents if they could convince him not to do it. They spoke to him and he was saying he just wanted his wife to be happy. They told him he could forget about the money if he does, since it would be effing me over. I think my grandparents also hated the idea that he was sending a clear message that he never loved me by just using the name for the kid he wants to raise. My dad ended up backing down. His wife was pissed and she blamed me, even though he said it was my grandparents who intervened. She said she knows I must have said I didn't like it or something, and whatever I did, I was a selfish little C because I took away her chance to name her child what she wanted. She said Serenity was a name she chose when she was little and always wanted to use it. My grandparents came home while she was ranting at me and made her leave. My dad and his wife are no longer welcome at all. I can't get what she said out of my head, so I feel like I need to ask, am I the a-hole?
What secret would ruin your life if people found out? Back in middle high school, my mom, sister, and I lived with my stepfather so I could go to a better school. At first, everything was okay, but then he started acting crazy. Whenever my mom went to work, my sister and I were alone with him until he left for his job. He would get really angry and yell at us for no good reason, over small things. It was really scary for my sister and me. Things got worse over time. He started hitting us almost every day, still over tiny things. Once, he got furious because I hung his shirt in the wrong direction on the hanger. Sometimes, he would even grab one of us and hold us against the wall by our throat. My mom didn't know any of this because he knew how to hurt us without leaving marks, and he was very good at lying. Every time we tried to tell her, he would lie and cover it up. He once blamed his bad behavior on his heart medicine when she was around. When my sister turned 18, she moved out, and then all his anger was directed at me. In my senior year, I was so scared for my safety that I ran off into the woods next to our house until my mom came home. Finally, she believed me, and we made plans to leave as soon as I finished school. When she told him, he blamed me for their marriage problems. Those last few months were terrible, but in June of last year, we moved away. Now I'm in college, far away from him, and safe. I don't have any hatred towards him, but I can't forgive the terrible things he put me through. If my mother knew just how terrible he was, I don't think she would be able to live with herself for bringing him into my life, so, for all our sakes, I hope this can be buried in the past. My daughter's imaginary friend comes to her bedroom every night to show her a magic trick. Now, I'm starting to believe that this isn't just an imaginary friend. I am a single father and it hasn't always been easy, but my daughter 8 and I have managed. Before the start of Corona, we had moved into a new house in northern Germany, which is close to my parents. Soon after we settled in, Leanna started to tell me about her new friend, quickly telling me only she could see him. I brushed it off as she has always been creative, and since we were under lockdown, I thought it was normal. Especially since one of my friend's son had also had an imaginary friend. Throughout the next few months, she would tell me about him. How he would come to play with her once I put her to bed, and his favorite color is blue. This morning after she woke up and ate breakfast, I decided to sit her down and ask her about her friend. Mostly asking simple questions, though the main ones were: what was his name? Has he ever asked you to do bad things like hurt herself or me? And if she was scared of him. She told me he said to call him Wittig. Which is a name I've genuinely never heard of in my life. And that he never told her to do anything bad or hurt herself or me. And she's only ever been scared of him once. Of course, I asked why, and she proceeded to tell me the story of when he started to come over to play. She said it was a few hours after I put her to bed. And she was having a hard time falling asleep, but she noticed something outside. And had gotten up to investigate. Apparently, he slowly started to move to the window until he was right in front of it. And just stared at her. Like he was, in her words, very sad and upset. So of course, being the sweetheart child, she wrote a small note and pressed it to the window asking if he was okay. And apparently, he shook his head no. She somehow managed to open the window a little bit and then asked why. She was told it was because he was very scared of the dark and had no one to play with. So of course she offered to play with him. He told her he would like that, but before he could she had to invite him inside. Which she did. This is when I start getting scared. She said after she did, he smiled, pushed the window open, and crawled in on all fours, which made her very scared and she started to cry. But apparently, He comforted her and then did a magic trick. I have of course asked her what the trick was, and she said he made all the lights turn on in her room to show her he wasn't scary. I started to ask her more and what other magic tricks he had done. And they ranged from making flowers appear to take both of the outsides. Apparently, he also likes to show her the stars and moons. I'm starting to believe that this isn't just an imaginary friend. The amount of detail she went into constantly referring to him being real and just many other things. I did a little digging, and Wittig is an extremely old German name. Which makes a little sense as we are from northern Germany. And we currently live here as well. But she's never been exposed to that name before. And I know no one in my family named that. So I started to spend even more time with her. Even doing my work hours beforehand so I could spend the rest of the day with her. But she still kept talking about this friend. But everything changed 2 nights back. I had woken up randomly around 3 a.m. I could just feel something wasn't right. So I got up and went to go check on Leanna. She was sleeping in her bed, though her blanket was a little different than how I had left her. I figured she had just moved. But as I was leaving, just in the corner of my eye I saw a figure in the window that looked out into the woods outside of our home. I looked at it for a good 2 minutes before it simply disappeared. I really couldn't figure out what it was. Some part of me was thinking it was my eyes playing tricks on me. But that day I asked her to draw me a picture of him. I sent it to my mom and the single dad group I am in, and they all said it was scary as hell. I planned to bring my daughter to my parents' house, and without saying I collapsed shortly after she left. I hadn't slept more than 40 minutes every night. I'm getting the house completely cleansed by a Catholic priest, and he's coming over tomorrow and then plans to have the place cleared out with sage. She is very much aware that something is wrong at this point. As I had her sleep in my room for the last few days and could tell I got very paranoid at night. I told her that there had been a few burglaries in our area and was just worried. I also plan to be getting a nanny cam for her room just as extra security. Just in case it doesn't leave after all of this. I am just glad she is out of the house until Thursday. I think it is very pissed off with me though. Starting a night ago, I woke up with huge scratches on my arms. And horrific headaches that I've never had before. At this point the pain doesn't really bother me, it's more of the fear of it trying to get to my daughter again. I don't know if I should tell her the creature's origins or if I should wait until she is much older to explain this to her.
I miss my boyfriend when he was big. My boyfriend and I dated for 7 years. We're in our mid-20s now. I met him through his best friend in junior year of high school. It was love at first sight for me. He was on the overweight side, a little shorter than me, and his looks weren't that great to others. It was his personality that got me. He was so caring and sweet, and we shared the same sense of humor. He had a dorky smile that I adored so much. He would compliment on how pretty I did my makeup and notice the little changes like shade of lipstick, shape of eyeliner, and extra mole. I kept all the letters he wrote for me on our anniversaries. He was bullied several times and had major insecurities about himself. I stayed with him among those years, and did my best to support him. I once told him I loved every part of him, and that there wasn't anything of him I wanted to change. He cried that day. 3 years ago we decided to buy a membership at the gym. We made a resolution that we would achieve a healthier lifestyle. We cleared out our pantries and changed our groceries to fully commit to our goal. We gave up several times, but reminded each other of our goal and went back on track. Fast forward, he's lost almost half his weight. He's very fit now, with nice pecs and tight abs. I couldn't be more proud of him. The problem is, he's like a new person. He's always either at the gym, at work, or went to bed early for his 8 hours of sleep. Whenever we're together, he comments on the food I eat or my weight. He constantly shows me the comments he gets from girls after posting shirtless body pictures, saying how he was hot and how they wish they could touch his abs, like he was proud of it. He replied to one girl, telling her that she was free to feel his muscles anytime with a winky face. I confronted him, telling him it was disrespectful to say that when he had a girlfriend, and he tried to insist it was just a joke and called me insecure for it. He never tells me he loves me anymore. We're only intimate when he wants to. He only talks about his workout plan to me, and is uninterested whenever I tell him about my day. We don't go out on dates anymore because he's embarrassed of me, and thinks I would put a bad look on him because I'm not athletic. I'm 5'5" and weight 125 pounds. I screamed at him, telling him I dated him when he was double my size, and always defended him whenever people insulted him. He told me at least he made a change, and it's sad how I always stayed the same. He's became an a-hole, and I'm in so much grief. I read the letters he used to write for me and cried for an hour. It feels like the man I was in love with had passed away. After my lease ends, 2 months, I will cut him off and never look back. I thought I was going to marry this man, but now I don't think I could be with someone who will put me down after all those years I've been supporting his insecurities. I'm so heartbroken. I miss the person who he was. My entitled mother-in-law called the cops on my parents and kicked them out of my house when she failed to seduce my father. Now, she has nowhere to go because I am evicting her. My mother-in-law moved in with us back in 2015 after my father-in-law passed because she was financially struggling. My mother-in-law is not easy to live with and we struggled immensely at the beginning, but after a few years, we found a way to cohabit. Then recently, 3 months ago to be exact, my parents' house burned down and they moved in with us while everything was sorted out with insurance and so on. My boys are sharing a bedroom as my parents are currently staying in my eldest bedroom. My mother-in-law has struggled with this and seems to hate my mother being around. My mother has done nothing to upset her or to disturb her. In fact, my parents' bedroom is on the other side of the house. She doesn't however have a problem with my father and always finds a way to hang out with him. A few days ago while I was away for work a massive argument happened between my mother and mother-in-law. My mother had accused her of trying to seduce my father. There were some inappropriate texts sent to my father. He immediately showed it to my mother and she responded as if she was my father to see how far mother-in-law would go, and well, she went far. In the texts, mother-in-law told my father that he can sneak into her room when my mother is sleeping and she would make him feel like 20 for all the things she would do to him. She also sent a picture of her in her 90s. Well, my mother confronted her and mother-in-law called the police, saying she felt threatened, who then escorted my parents out of the house. This all happened while my husband was at work and the kids at school. My parents went to stay at a hotel and they explained what happened to me over the phone. When I returned, I gave mother-in-law 2 weeks to move out. My husband thinks I'm escalating things and that I should forgive his mother's actions because she was lonely and confused, so I showed him the screenshot of her mother's text and pictures sent to my father. He's horrified and was not able to finish reading. She's 65, not 100 unless she suffers from dementia. She knew exactly what she was doing. I wanted to kick her out immediately, but my husband begged me to give him 2 weeks so he could find a place for her. I don't want her in this house, and it is clear why. She doesn't get to call the cops to kick out my parents like she owns the place, and she certainly violated my father and has been horrible to my mother. She needs to go and attend grief therapy. My husband has profusely apologized to my parents, but my parents aren't upset with us and hold only mother-in-law responsible, as it was her disgusting actions that led to this.
After my mom passed away, I noticed my dad getting really close to a guy named Peter, and I'm pretty sure they're dating, but I think he's ashamed to open up to me. My female mom passed away from COVID in summer 2020, and it really messed my dad up. He was still working and taking care of me, but that was pretty much it. He wasn't doing anything he used to like to do, and obviously he was busier because he had to take care of me all by himself and he couldn't go out because of COVID. But still, like he used to like hockey and weird old action movies. But he stopped watching all that stuff. I was also super depressed, obviously, but after a while I started doing stuff for fun again, like video games and hanging out with my friends and stuff. But he didn't, and when I was a kid I didn't really think about it. But now that I'm older, I was worrying about him. He started doing more stuff and being less sad all the time last summer. Then in October, he started doing this community service thing that picks up trash in different neighborhoods. And then he met this guy, Peter, fake name, I think he's 40-ish, and I think they're dating. They hang out at least twice a week, sometimes more. I stay at school until 8, 3 times a week for robotics club, and my dad sees Peter at least one of those days every week. My dad used to talk about him all the time. He was always all Peter said, or I was talking to Peter and he doesn't talk about him that much anymore, but they text a lot. And my dad is always smiling at his phone and he started dressing nicer and getting his hair cut more often and stuff. And there's other stuff too. I just get a vibe from them. So I was like 90% sure they were dating, but thought maybe my dad was just excited to have a friend again. He was probably lonely, I guess, but now it's Ramadan and Peter, who isn't even Muslim, has stopped by a few times before sunrise to bring my dad food for suhoor, and friends don't cook for each other at stupid o'clock in the morning. They must be dating. I guess I technically still don't know they're dating, but like they're definitely dating lol. So now I want to know how to get him to feel okay. Telling me my dad never said he was bi. I don't know if he just didn't tell people or if Peter is the first guy. He's like, he and my mom got together when he was 19, so he didn't have a ton of time to date guys before now, and I know he's okay with LGBT people. If I were gay, I wouldn't be afraid of telling him at all. But he was a teenager in the early 2000s when things were different, so maybe he's ashamed. There are some gay people in our mosque and it's cool, but I know some Muslims don't like gay people. I don't know what the mosque you went to as a kid was like, so maybe it's like he doesn't think it's okay for him to be by just other people. I don't know, and I also feel kind of weird about it, which isn't cool of me. I know, but I don't know. He took his wedding ring off a few months ago, which is part of why I started thinking he and Peter were dating. And I know my mom's dad and my dad's not actually that old, so it's not fair to think he can ever date anyone else or get married again, and I want him to be happy and stuff. But it's also like he's supposed to be married to my mom. You know, Peter's okay, but he's not my mom and not going to lie. It's kind of weird that he's dating a man who is a Muslim. I'm barely Muslim now. I pray with my dad, but I don't think I really believe anymore. And I'm not really fasting, but being Muslim is important to my dad. What if dating someone who isn't Muslim makes him stop being Muslim too? But also, it might be weird if he dated a Muslim woman because then it'd be like a replacement for my mom. I don't know. I feel weird. So how do I support my dad and make him feel like it's okay to come out? And how do I deal with my own crap and not make him feel bad? Update: this actually happened like 2 weeks ago, but I don't need advice. I don't think so. I didn't post anything. But then I remembered some of you seem kind of invested in my dad's love life lol. So here we go. I was thinking a lot about everything with my dad and how to talk to him and how to deal with the way I feel about everything without making my dad feel bad or like I'm the main character and he has to do what I want or anything. And I guess I was acting weird because my dad asked me if I was okay and I said that he wasn't wearing his wedding ring anymore. So he asked me if that upset me, and I said kinda, because it wasn't like he just took it off when my mom died and he wasn't married anymore. He kept wearing it then, but then he took it off now, so he feels different now, I guess. And I was afraid he didn't care anymore because I don't want him to be sad all the time anymore. But I do kind of want him to still be a little sad maybe, which I know isn't cool of me, but I'm still a little sad. Then my dad got quiet for a while and then he apologized that he made me feel like he didn't care about my mom anymore and that he'd been handling things badly since she died. He said that he still loves my mom and everything, but that he loved her different now, and he had been acting like it was the same, which was why he was sad all the time. But then he accepted that even though he still loved her and she was still his wife, it was different and he felt better. But then looking at his wedding ring made him really upset. I don't know, he explained it really well, but I think it sounds dumb the way I wrote it. But it made sense when he said it because, like, she's still my mom and I still love her, but obviously she's not my mom the way she was when she was there all the time. Then he asked me if I wanted their wedding rings. He said he'd been holding on to my mom's for me when I got older, and he figured I was old enough now to be responsible with it and not lose it. So we got a chain for me to put them on, and I were both there. Wedding rings around my neck now. Anyway, since we were talking about it, I wanted to say something about how my dad is dating Peter. I know some of you said that maybe they were just friends, but if you were in my house and you saw the way my dad talks about him, you would not think that I haven't spent a lot of time with Peter or anything. But I have been around him and my dad together and they're not just friends lol. So I told my dad that I wouldn't be mad or upset if he dated someone else. It would be okay. He shouldn't be alone forever. And he said it meant a lot that I said that. Then I said that Peter seems pretty cool and my dad got all awkward. Not in a year or so. Wrong way. And I'm embarrassed to talk about my boyfriend way. And it was funny for a bit, but then I felt kind of bad lol. So I said, Peter's old man sweaters aren't cool, but that at least they're better than my dad's dumb polo shirts, which I said mostly to change the vibe, but also because it's true. And my dad called me a brat, then hugged me and said I was a good kid and we moved on. So we didn't really talk about it, I guess. But I know they're dating and he knows I know they're dating and I'm cool with it and I still feel a little weird about my dad dating someone who isn't my mom. But I feel better about it. Not sure if anyone is reading this, but if you are, I hope you liked it lol. I pretend my wife is a giant roach to get off. The time I effed up by admitting to my girlfriend that I pretend she is a giant cockroach when we have intimacy. Ever since I was a teenager I have had very intense fantasies about having intimacy with a giant roach. It started in 9th or 10th grade when we read The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. As I started to think more and more about the roach creature that the character had become, I started to imagine what it would be like if a woman turned into the roach instead. I found this idea very arousing. I would not be repulsed or frightened of her, as the characters in the story are. I would take care of her. Then my thoughts started to get intimate with the character. Eventually I sort of dropped the bit about her having been a human woman first, and I kind of imagined this fictionalized roach species. They are giant roaches, the size of a person, and have complete intelligence. I kind of over time conjured up an imaginary friend of sorts. She was one of these roaches and her name was Oktha. I would fantasize about her often. Whenever I touched myself I'd be imagining elaborate scenarios of me and Oktha making love. When I started to have actual intimacy, I found I could not, perform, if I wasn't thinking of Oktha. So basically now, anytime I have intimacy with a woman, I am pretending that she is actually Oktha. Not just think about Oktha, I concentrate intently to visualize that I actually am doing Oktha. I don't want to think about the girl at all. There is only Oktha. Of course this intimacy can never be as exciting as my fully imaginary sessions with Oktha. There are things that are multiple appendages and antennae allow for that a human woman can never match. So anyways, I've been in a relationship with my girlfriend for about a year. 3 or 4 times I have tried to have intimacy with her and not pretend she is Oktha, but I just can't do it. So essentially every time we have intimacy I am imagining she is Oktha. I finally confided this to her the other day, and I was blown away by her reaction. I thought she might take it a bit badly at first but that she'd get used to it. No. I have never seen such a look of disgust before. Outraged is not an understatement. She is not even returning my texts now. I am afraid she is actually going to break up with me and also that is going to tell people about Oktha. I don't know how I will face anyone. This is going to sound silly but I also feel guilty about feeling shame, as if Oktha will be saddened by this, even though I know she is imaginary. I just don't know what to do at this point. I pretend my wife is a giant roach to get off. I decided to stop fooling myself and I just committed to the love of Oktha. I know she is not real per se, but in my head she is an actual personality. And I am in love with that personality. I don't care if she is a roach or if she is imaginary, the love is real. Call me deluded, but it's harmless, it makes me happy. I have not had a real girlfriend again since that incident 5 years ago, but occasionally I have had one-night stands via online apps, with the understanding of it being one night in advance, and on these times I always envision the woman as Oktha, my sensual roach queen. Now, I mean no offense to the women of course, and even a gentleman once or twice, the many appendages of Oktha make translation to human gender almost irrelevant, I just envision they are Oktha. And no, haha, I have never confided to them about it. I learned my lesson. The thing about it though is that I became so in love with my Oktha that I married her. I even did a little ceremony in my living room. I recited my own vows, and she recited hers. I even went on a honeymoon, which technically you could say was a solo vacation to New Orleans for a week, but in my mind Oktha was with me the entire time. In my mind I think of her as my wife. Now here's where I messed up. I got so used to thinking of her as my wife in my head, that a few months ago at work I nonchalantly said my wife in some innocuous sentence. I think it was something like oh yeah me and my wife love that show in regards to Chopped. So now everyone was asking me about my wife, because they had never heard I was married or even dating anyone. Everyone kept pestering me. Wanting to know about her. Wanting to see pictures. I became full of panic. I did the one thing I swore I would never do again. I talked to other people about Oktha in real life. We were at a team lunch, and I just let it all spill out. I told them about how I became enamored as a teenager with the Franz Kafka story, how my fantasy evolved into an actual imaginary entity with a personality, and how I slowly began to grow in love with her. What started as a mere intimate attraction to giant roaches blossomed into a whirlwind romance, and that she became the love of my life, even though her existence was in my own mind. At first they thought I was doing a creepy joke, but I convinced them I was telling the truth. Well, they were afraid and disgusted. I have been a pariah at work ever since. Everybody steers clear of me. We used to have a good social life, now people only speak to me for work-related reasons. Even working virtually now, nobody sends me a Slack message unless it is about work. I even heard a rumor that people went to HR, but they were of course told nothing could be done. I have lost my good work friends because of this, and it is indeed jeopardizing my career, because my bosses think I'm insane. I have ruined my friendships and future career prospects due to my honesty. I am thinking of starting to look for a new job, although it is difficult in the current environment. I can start fresh elsewhere though. No matter what, I will be staying with my wife, Oktha. For me, it is Oktha forever. If you must know, I do hope that even if I am an old man, that one day the technology is invented to extract the Oktha personality from my mind and implant it into a real external body, either of a genetically engineered or a mechanical nature, and me and Oktha can then experience genuine physical connection. But if she must remain within me, that is fine. Her love keeps me warm on the coldest of nights. Girls have read it. What was the best flirting technique someone did to you? 1. A guy told me that he liked my shoes and asked where I'd gotten them. We were in a bowling alley. 2. It was my first day in middle school, and this kid asked to see my planner. I handed it to him and he flipped to the contact section and left me his name and number. I'll never forget how smooth he was. 3. Not sure if this counts as flirting, but he read my favorite book just so we'd have something in common to talk about. 4. We were 15. Opening credits of the movie started. He put his arm around me and said, "If I'm going to start flirting, I'd better start early." Been together 23 years. 5. Flirted with my dog first. 6. He said, "I have a riddle for you." Then he took my hand and traced a line down the middle of my palm. "This is a river. It is too wide to jump over, too deep to wade across, too fast to swim across, and too long to go around. There is a bunny stuck on one side of it. How does the bunny cross the river?" After about 10 minutes of me trying to guess the answer, I gave up and asked him how the bunny got across the river. He said, "Who cares? I just wanted to hold your hand." 7. I had a boyfriend who was really into working out in martial arts. I asked him to show me a move and he swept my feet out from under me, then caught me and kissed me. Hottest thing ever. 8. I once had a guy walk up to me at a bar and said, "Hello, my name is Rob and I'll be hitting on you tonight. What can I get you to drink?" Silly, playful and direct. We dated for about 8 months. 9. We met at a Halloween house party, and when I was going to leave, he walked me to the room with all the coats, which also happened to be a kid's room, and he asked me, "What color crayon would you like to write your phone number with?" I married him, celebrated 20 years. 10. Not me, but my mom. My mom and dad were set up by a friend of theirs. My mom is completely deaf upon being told this before he met her. My dad went out and learned as much sign language as he could before he met her. My mom doesn't know sign language. Adorable and hilarious. 11. Not a girl, but I like staring at women until they notice, and then quickly look away and leave without saying anything and repeatedly calling myself a creepy idiot who deserves to die alone. 12. My first boyfriend came into the store where I was working and just straight up told me he had seen me through the window and needed to run home to clean up and put on something nice so he could come back and ask me on a date. It was super endearing. 13. Love the phrasing of this question and I shall use that from now on. How did you and dad meet? He did. Flirting to me. I stole over $20,000 in a very creative way in the 90s. I worked at a fast food chain in the 90s when I was in high school. When I worked there they were in the process of phasing out denominational gift certificates. $5, $10 and $25. The way it worked was if you spent more than half of the certificate they gave you the cash back. So if you ordered $5.50 worth of food and gave them one of the $10 gift cards, they gave you the $4.50 back in cash. My manager was in charge of destroying all the existing certificates as we transitioned to the more traditional credit card looking gift cards. So my manager said he shredded the certificates like he was supposed to, but one night when I was closing I found 2 boxes of the gift cards tucked deep in the dry storage room. They were filled with the certificates that were supposed to be shredded. So, I scooped them up, brought them out to the dumpster in trash bags and threw them away. After we closed, I came back and recovered the back, and brought the certificates home. I counted them. There were $1,025, $1,010, and $505 certificates. None of them had expiration dates. Total haul was $40,000 in fast food certificates. My manager never said a word. He couldn't. He had reported them destroyed weeks earlier. Over the next 3 years my girlfriend and I toured every location in our state, and the next 4 states ordering food, and getting the change. We never kept track of a spreadsheet or anything, but we got good at knowing what menu items were just about half. After the first year, we started saving the change in a shoe box, and let it build up. I bought my first car for $7,800 cash from the change, and for some reason a kitty cone was $1.05. If you gave them a $5 cert they gave you $3.95 back. We threw away a lot of kitty cones. I punched an autistic kid after he groped me. Now everyone hates me. That grope was the last straw. I have known Troy since kindergarten and he has always been babied. It was always his autism that made him who he was. I don't know why, but he always had a crush on me. I rejected him gently multiple times, but he never took no for an answer. As we grew older, he got worse. He started commenting on my chest, asking to touch them, asking to see them. His friends kept trying to convince me to show him because nobody would be nice enough to give him a chance. And in year 7, 6th grade, he started me. I told teachers, but they kept saying that his autism doesn't make him know any better. It was only me. He got jealous when I was in the presence of another guy. He would have meltdowns. And I got into trouble because I knew how upset he would get. No, I didn't. It was like my only purpose was to be his. I wasn't allowed to be my own person. The green continued. I kept telling him to stop. He didn't listen. I remember crying on the floor. And teachers just kept saying that his autism makes him like this and that I am being a good person by taking care of him. His hurt. I don't know how to explain it. He just grabbed me hard and it hurt. The groping continued for 4 years. I was always his caretaker, his girlfriend, his best friend, his. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. It was hot and I wore a skirt and he proceeded to do it to me. I lost it. And him around the nose. His nose got broken. And unfortunately now I'm getting put into isolation for 2 months for bullying an autistic kid. He's not a kid though. He's a 16-year-old. He acts normal around his friends, he treats everyone else with respect. He's not a kid. Now everyone hates me. I have been receiving death and people have been saying he should have done worse. Now all I want to do is curl up and pass away. Maybe I should have been nicer. Maybe I should have been more sympathetic. Maybe I should have just accepted it. I could have been his only chance. For the record, I don't despise autistic people. He is not a representative of them. He is just an awful person. Troy is just a horrible person. Thank you for letting me vent. What's the most supernatural experience you've ever had? I came back to life after I died. I got a phone call from my next door neighbor late in the evening asking if I can help him move a mattress into his upstairs. His mom is ill and has a big heavy sleep number bed. I of course ran over to help because they're great neighbors. I get over there and his friend, who is also a priest, was there to help. I helped them figure out how to separate the mattress from the bed so we could fit it upstairs. We get it all moved up and back in place when my neighbor asks if I can help them move an armoire upstairs too. I think nothing of it and we pull it out of his travel trailer and start bringing it up the front stairs of his house. This is where I died. The front stairs are 11 steps. I was on the lower end of the armoire about 6 steps up when my neighbor and his friend lose a handle on the armoire and it comes crashing down on me and I fall backwards towards the pavement. I then wake up in my dining room to my phone ringing and my wife asking me if I'm going to answer the phone. It's my neighbor asking me if I can help move a bed upstairs for his mom. I go over there and meet his priest friend again, as this has been the first time I met him. I say I can help with the bed but I cannot help with the armoire. My neighbor was like, how'd you know about the armoire? I then proceeded to tell them I'm pretty sure I just died. I spent the next hour talking with the priest. He had so many questions. My neighbor didn't believe it until I described the upstairs bedroom in perfect detail down to the metal mattress frame on the floor and the intricate headboard leaning against the wall, and I had never been upstairs in their house before. The priest asked me what I saw after I died. I told him I never actually died. Before it happened I woke up at my dining room table.
My unhinged husband went Hulk when he learned that we were having 3 daughters because he wants a son, so I filed for divorce and got him casted out of church. I have been with my husband for 5 years, and married for 3 of those years. Our marriage was perfect and we were so happy. It felt like our entire life was perfect. Church on Sunday, loving husband, beautiful home, all of it. A few months into our marriage I became pregnant and my husband and I were overjoyed, and so was the rest of our family. My husband was especially happy after finding out our baby was a boy, as he'd always told me he wanted at least one son. I even started to try to attempt to repair my relationship with my mother so our son could have a relationship with his grandparents. I had originally cut off most contact with my mother due to how she treated my brother when he married his husband, though my brother said he was right with my decision to try to get her back in my life since he still has love for her and my baby was her first grandchild. However, our son ended up stillborn, and it broke me. I fell into a depression and even at one point considered taking my life, but my husband was there for me during all of it and we got through the grief. Our marriage felt stronger than ever and life started slowly feeling beautiful again, even if it no longer felt perfect. About 5 months ago I found out I'm pregnant again, and then found out soon after that we're having triplets. My husband and I were over the moon and he was the most doting and loving husband. Since we had always said we wanted 2 to 3 children, we agreed we wouldn't try for any more children after this. Because of our and our family's excitement for the triplets, we decided to throw a baby shower and gender reveal party. We trusted my brother with the genders of the triplets and he bought some confetti cannons with the colored streamers inside. The baby shower went wonderfully with my parents, in-laws, my brother and his husband, and their daughter, and tons of friends and extended family. It was like a dream come true and I was so excited for the gender reveal. I don't care what the gender of our babies was, I just wanted healthy little babies, but my husband was excited for potentially 3 sons. When the time came, my husband and my brother all shot a confetti cannon and all 3 shot out pink confetti. I was so excited and so was my brother, but my husband screamed at the top of his lungs and hit the table in front of us, hitting it so hard that it actually broke. He screamed at me that I was supposed to give him at least 1 son because I unalived his first one. That's when I burst into tears. I had been so broken up about our son's stillbirth and a part of me had felt it was my fault, and now my husband, the love of my life, telling me that it was. My brother immediately stepped in and tried to get my husband to calm down, but my husband shoved my brother, so my brother instead pulled me inside where I cried in the living room while my husband's mother tried to calm him down. I could hear him screaming outside about how 3 daughters are too many, how he doesn't want 4 kids but he also wants a son. Ever since that moment, my husband has hardly talked to me. He's been sleeping in the guest room, and when we do interact he's clearly upset and mad and tries to argue with me. I tried to talk to him about it and asked about how he'll be with our 3 daughters, but he spat at me and told me he will provide them shelter and food, but he isn't interested in daughters and doesn't plan to have a close relationship with them. That sealed the deal that I wanted to divorce him, and I cried myself to sleep last night. Earlier today I confided in my mother and mother-in-law about all this, but they told me I can't divorce my husband just because he wants a son. I don't want my daughters to grow up in an unloving household where their parents constantly argue and their father doesn't love them. The moment my husband said I unalived our son, I felt as though I lost all love I had for him in an instant, and I don't want my daughters to be in that kind of household. However, both my mom and mother-in-law say it's just natural for men to want sons and that at least he isn't saying he'll mistreat them. They treated this as absolute fact and acted as though I was just a silly little girl who didn't know anything. I felt incredibly small and stupid. I don't know what to do. My mother and mother-in-law make me feel like maybe I'm overreacting to my husband's behavior, but my brother says this is not normal as he and his husband are both men who absolutely love their daughter. I'm also not sure of what I'll do with myself if I divorce my husband. I don't work and I'm not sure how I'll be able to find a job that can support me and 3 babies all on my own, or how I'll make time for all of them when I have to work. I feel so lost and helpless. Update: I went to my brother's house. We talked for hours through the night and came up with a plan. I am going to divorce my husband. He's shown the kind of man he is, and I don't want to live in or raise daughters in that kind of environment. I'm going to move in with my brother and brother-in-law during all this. He and his husband have a nice, large house where I can have my own room and a nursery for the triplets. I originally worried that perhaps myself and 3 babies would be overwhelming or a burden to him and my brother-in-law, but they assured me they would love to have us here. I knew everything would be okay when my brother even offered to have a baby monitor put in their bedroom so he could help if more than one of the triplets woke up during the night. My brother-in-law has a nice, high-paying job and my brother works from home, so I will have a stable environment and my brother will help with his nieces. My own niece is excited for us to live with her. The current plan is I will live with my brother and brother-in-law for a while, and once my babies are old enough where I feel comfortable putting them in daycare, which my brother-in-law has offered to pay for, then I can try to find a job of my own where I can save up money and eventually move into a nice place of my own with my daughters. I'm so thankful for my brother and brother-in-law. They truly feel like angels. My brother and I will also have no contact with my mother. My brother and I discussed her behavior with us growing up, how she treated him when he came out and also got married, and how she treated me these past few days. We decided this was the best course of action as we've given her many chances to become more stable and kind, but she's always refused them, and we want our daughters to grow up in a loving family. When I knew my husband had left for church that morning, my brother-in-law, and I went to my house and got all my important things such as documents, clothes, and things that are special to me, as well as all the baby things. My brother-in-law's mother watched my niece while we did all this. She's a kind woman and has offered to be a grandmother to my own babies, which I happily accepted. I will admit that I cried. I've cried a lot lately, but mostly happy tears. Because my brother and I didn't go to church, my ladies' Bible study group texted me and asked if we were all right and if we needed anything. I texted them back and told them the truth and what happened, and they were all horrified. They told me they support me and are proud of me for taking action, and are now even planning a bake sale at the church to help raise money for me and my babies. Also, apparently when my husband went out to lunch after church with his men's Bible group, one of the other members is husband to one of my friends in my Bible group, and when he found out what happened he yelled at my husband so much that he cried. I got a little bit of joy out of hearing about that, not going to lie. My pastor even called me and asked if I was okay, and he let me know that I'll always have people who support me at my church, which I'm very grateful for. After my husband came home from church and saw that most of my stuff was gone, he blew up my phone. But my brother-in-law called him for me and said that he would pay for my husband to get therapy for his grief over our son, and also told him to leave me alone. My husband has not tried to contact me since, and he has yet to give my brother-in-law an answer to his therapy offer. All in all, I'm so grateful for my brother and brother-in-law. I wouldn't be able to do any of this without them. I'm hopeful for the future, and while this isn't the kind of future I imagine myself or my babies, this is the best one I can currently give them. They say it takes a village, and my babies will have a village full of love and support.
So I work as a nanny. If go out to, let's say, Target with the kiddos, old ladies love to coo over them. The babies are adorable, so this is usually fine. Normally they just tell me how cute my kids are, even though they aren't mine, and continue on their way. Occasionally they try to get touchy, which I don't allow. I tell politely but firmly not to touch the babies, which in almost all cases works because most women are understandable. Some give me a scowl and then walk away. But in this case, on one occasion I was at Target, yeah, I love that place, with a 14-month-old in my cart. We were just scoping for a stroll and getting some items. She was being her adorable little self. This older woman approached us and immediately reached out to touch toddler. I ask her politely not to touch her. She pretty much ignores me and starts pinching toddler's cheeks, which she hates, and tells me how cute little girl is. I again politely respond to her and try to strike up some nice conversation, considering she seemed almost like a grandma. Then she asks me if she can hold little one and take her around the store while I shop. Yeah, hell no, not leaving my charge with strange old lady who doesn't respect our boundaries. So at this point I tell her we need to leave and get ready to go, but that it was nice to meet you. Ignoring me, she tries to unstrap toddler from the cart. I go into full asshole mode, shove the lady away from my charge and start laying into her. She's mortified as I'm screaming at her, and then she starts to cry. I definitely might have been a bit aggressive, but I think she deserved it. What moment at the office made you realize it's time to start looking for a new job? When my son was an infant, after my wife's maternity leave was over, she went back to work about 30 minutes from our house. My job was about 90 minutes from our house. I had to leave home by 6 a.m. every morning to take my son to my in-laws for the day, so I could make it to work on time. Then, I had to be the first one out the door at work to make it back to my in-laws so I could pick up my son and bring him home. On a good day, I would be home with him by 6 p.m. On a bad day, particularly if it was snowing, we might not make it home until 8 p.m. one day. My son slept through the morning ride to my in-laws' place, and was asleep when I went to get him at the end of the day. I realized, when I went to sleep that night, that I had not seen my son awake that entire day. Worse. He hadn't seen me that day. So I started looking for a job closer to home. Over the years, I've taught at 4 different schools, always getting as close as possible to my own house, to maximize the time I get to spend with my children. I've got my commute down to fewer than 10 minutes now. It's great. I even come home on my lunch break so I can walk the dog some days. What baby name immediately makes you lose all respect for the parents and why? The day I took my son to kindergarten, I found out one of the girls in his class had a hideous name. In fact, the name was so offensive to me that I cried. Also partly for that little girl. You see, I lost a lot of family due to the Holocaust, and my grandmother and great-aunt were the only 2 survivors. Sadly, I lost them both. This year when I went to pick my son up from school, I heard a mother call out to her daughter. At first I thought I'd misheard what she said, maybe it was an Eastern European name. Then she said it again. I couldn't believe it. It shocked me to my core. I tried to subtly engage in some small talk and commented on how unusual her daughter's name was, asking her how she came up with it. She said she'd heard it somewhere. The name stuck, but she couldn't remember. She just thought it was a beautiful name. She had named her daughter Treblinka. Treblinka is the concentration camp with the second most victims, right after Auschwitz. I didn't tell her. I'm not angry at her, but realized the name probably didn't ring a bell with anyone in the families of both parents, nobody in the school, none of the other parents, and clearly not with the civil servant City Hall registering her birth, and particularly that last one is whom I lost all respect for. Civil servant should make damn sure a kid can't be named after a concentration camp. So the next time someone comments on the national commemoration that surely we know enough about the Holocaust by now, please show them this.
As a teenager, what was the worst thing your parents ever walked in on you doing? I was trying pole dance and belt out the song at the same time. Mom just laughed and said, "Well, I'm glad you're this bad. Now I'll never have to worry about you becoming a stripper." Going down on my boyfriend. She didn't see anything, but told him to stand up. He said no, thank you. In high school my mom walked in on me and my boyfriend, except I wasn't wearing anything below the belt and I had a blanket over myself. Since she had no idea anything was going on under there, she decided to sit with us and have a nice long chat before she left. Forgetting to knock, my mom walked in on me in the bathroom, on the toilet, eating a bowl of ravioli. My mom walked in on my brother trying to blow himself. As she walked in, he yelled, "I'm doing homework." But it was too late. She silently closed the door and they never spoke of it to each other again. He only told me one night because he was really drunk. Then I told the internet. I was photoshopping a D into the mouth of my friend.
What's the most desperate thing you've ever done for money? I used to pose exposed for art classes while I was an undergrad. Pay was pretty good, about 5 times minimum wage. One grad student who was a good artist but kind of odd asked if I would do a private session of a few hours. I agreed as I was desperate for money. I figured that I had just been hired to make love. I was a bit conflicted but then just figured why not. I showed up cleaned and prepped and dressed to look good, and it turned out that the artist really did want me to pose. During the whole thing they were polite, but very specific on poses, and it was actually a bit challenging. They were so intense. While not particularly good looking, the talent and effort was kind of a turn on. By the end I was half hoping it would turn into lovemaking and they would keep telling me how to pose, what to do, etc. We went over the time but the artist was nice and grateful and paid extra, so I guess that I learned I would be willing to make love for money in some situations.
My 12-year-old son is more mature than my hysterical wife. Since the start of the school year, my son's teacher has been regularly calling or emailing me asking to meet and discuss his behavior. At first, I was concerned that something might be wrong with him, but as the weeks passed, none of his other teachers had contacted me, so it was pretty clear that the teacher was the problem. On Friday, though, she sent her most detailed email yet, and this time she copied the principal and my wife on it. She listed dates and times that my son, Chris, had been disruptive or disrespectful, but the stuff he was alleged to have said seemed very normal for someone who's 12. It was stuff like laughing in class, making jokes about other students, and too much phone use. We didn't have smartphones when I was 12, but I am certain that I did those other things, and if we did have phones I'm sure I would be on mine in class. I just feel at a loss because it feels like she's singling out my kid. If she's not singling out my kid, she must be doing this crap with a whole bunch of other kids because she's getting upset over routine middle school behavior. Frankly, I can't believe she has any time to grade or enjoy fun activities. Well, I pulled Chris aside yesterday and told him that his teacher was upset with him. He told me that she's fairly new to teaching but very strict and that he has trouble getting interested in her subject, which is algebra. I joked with him that she had buyer's remorse and that she was probably really regretting spending all that money on an education degree just so that she could teach middle school boys. I teased my son all the time about his immature behavior, so he laughed, and then I told him in another few years she'll be just as burned out as your other teachers. This got us both laughing, and I told him that he shouldn't worry about her and that I wouldn't punish him. My wife got home later and I told her that I wasn't going to impose any consequences on Chris. She absolutely tore into me and she said that I was sending the wrong message to him and that if his teacher was copying the principal on these messages, his behavior must be pretty bad. I repeated the same talking points about his teacher choosing the wrong profession and pleaded with my wife to stop being so hysterical. I also reminded her that if this woman were intelligent she wouldn't be a middle school algebra teacher. My wife got really red, looked down, shook her head and walked away from me. It's now Sunday night and she's still barely speaking to me. I was ready to have a fun family weekend and she's decided to be a total pill. I've asked her to apologize to me over her behavior but this seems to only upset her more. At this point, Chris seems more grown up than she does and it's bizarre and worrying. I'm starting to research some therapists who might be able to help her. I just want my old wife back. Has something straight out of a cartoon happened in your life? It was a sunny day and I decided to sit on my windowsill with the window wide open and get some sunbathing in. I don't spend that long on the windowsill because I get hungry and I decide to go back in, swinging my legs round back into my living room. Somehow I managed to knock my phone off the edge with my hand, and it goes flying further onto the roof. My flat is on the top floor and the roof slants for a bit and then is just kinda flat, so it's not the most dangerous roof out there. Obviously I'm not just gonna leave my phone out there. I go and get it by scooting over to it really slowly, so I don't trip and fall off the edge. I'm being so safe about it, surely nothing could go wrong. Well, as I get out from under the window, which opens upwards, I must have knocked it, and it flies shut. Not fully, but it closes the latch which you need to push up to open it. My jaw has never dropped so fast in my life, because of course this happens to me. Of course this happens when all of my flatmates are out of town. I panic a little, but I'm like I just need to push up the latch from below, it'll be fine. I find some kind of metal bar further on the roof, because this building is falling apart, seconds away from just straight up disintegrating. I manage to slip my hand through the tiny gap in the side and try with all my strength to push the latch up. When I tell you I sat for like 45 minutes trying to push this latch up I am not joking. Well, I get nowhere with that metal bar, so I decide to call my friend, who has a lot more common sense than me. They tell me to call 999, so I do. I'm already embarrassed because I've been stuck on this effing roof for long enough already, and now I have to tell the authorities how I managed to get stuck on the roof like a dumbass. They come 5 minutes later, sirens and all, and they call me again. I scoot closer to the edge and wave down at them, and on the phone I tell them I can just chuck my keys down to them so we don't have to shut down the entire road to get me down. Nope. They put up effing safety tape, and they start effing maneuvering the cherry picker to come get me. I'm actually considering just jumping off at this point. I'm so embarrassed. Not only have I done the dumbest thing imaginable and locked myself on the roof, literally everyone in the entire city has come to see what the F is happening. Like there is a crowd waiting outside the tape just watching me. I get on the cherry picker and I get down, which is actually quite cool that I got to go on that. If I wasn't so humiliated I would have enjoyed it. After I got down I was so set to run back into my flat and just never leave it again, but of course the police have to ask me if I'm considering taking my life, so I have to tell them no, I'm just a complete idiot. They probably agreed with me honestly, I wouldn't blame them. Guy quit his job thinking he became rich. I work for a construction company, and we do remodeling on homes. We have a rule here that we get to keep anything we find hidden behind the walls. We hired this guy who was a total asshole from day one. I've been working for this company for 5 years, and this guy has only been doing construction for 1 year after he got fired from his accounting job for getting a DUI. Anyways, he would always make fun of my clothes and my accent, and one day he went too far by telling my boss about my private Instagram account pics. He got on my phone and looked through my Instagram page, and showed my boss pictures of me smoking weed. Little did he know, my boss has been my friend for 8 years, and we have smoked together too. He was actually the one that took the picture. My boss laughed it off, and he was mad that his plans didn't work. I was so mad that he violated my privacy then, so I made a plan to fuck him over. He was the kind of guy who would always come in late and complain that trains or traffic was why he was always late. One day I overheard him saying that if he won the lottery, he would quit his job for not getting the respect he deserved, talking about the Instagram photo incident. I bought some fake gold coins online, and I put them in a metal box I found at the antique store and waited for a chance to hide them in a wall. Luckily I did not have to wait long. The day he found the coins it seemed like it was his best day ever. The first thing he did when he opened the box? He called my boss, calling him a fucking loser, and he quit immediately on the spot. He said, "Fuck this place and all of you. I'm rich." What he didn't know was that that was actually the best day of my life. After he quit, my boss told us that he was going to fire him anyways for always showing up late and invading others' privacy. I wish I could see the look on his face when he finds out the gold coins are fake. Best $40 I spent in my life. My mom still thinks I'm a virgin and I'm going along with it. I have been struggling with anxiety, depression, and numbness ever since I realized what happened to me during my childhood, from 2nd or 3rd grade through 5th grade. To provide some context, my mom and stepdad owned a bar where she bartended while he managed the rest. Instead of bringing me to the bar, she would leave me with our family friends. Sometimes, when the parents were helping out at the bar, I would stay with their older kids in their house. We lived close to each other briefly, which is why I would also go to their house during the daytime. The two sisters lived together, along with all their children. I recall that one of the boys approached me about sex, and I initially refused. However, I distinctly remember standing by the door, gripping the frame, while the daughter of one of the sisters physically pushed me and coerced me, assuring me that no one would know and that it wouldn't hurt. Eventually, I gave in. I don't remember the first time in detail, but other boys in the house also had intimacy with me. When relatives or other boys from their extended family visited, they would also engage in similar acts. At that time, I mistakenly believed that it was something to be proud of because boys seemed to like me. Their family members would even ask about me, which made me feel a strange sense of power. Even after my mom and I moved, it continued to happen. However, during 5th or 6th grade, the bar scene slowed down, and I stopped going with my mom. I never disclosed this to anyone and, at the time, I didn't feel guilty about it. In 8th grade, despite a considerable amount of time having passed since I had stopped engaging in intimate activities, I didn't consider myself conventionally attractive. However, I did have a curvier figure, including a relatively large butt compared to my peers. Sometimes, boys I secretly liked in school would slap me on the butt. Although I occasionally asked them to stop, deep down, I enjoyed the attention from boys. I had never even kissed them or spoken to them after school, but their attention made me feel good. In high school, my self-hatred grew, and I started harboring resentment towards my mom. I came to realize that what had happened to me was wrong, and that I should never have allowed myself to be pressured into those acts. I despised my body because I had been dealing with BV, bacterial vaginosis, since a young age. I also resented my mom for trusting her friends, the parents and their kids, with my well-being. I felt as though she had chosen her romantic partner over me and had never created a safe space for me to confide in her about what I had gone through. I don't remember all the details, only fragments and how certain situations made me feel. My childhood memories are hazy at best. Occasionally, I allow myself to recall specific instances, and I can remember 7 boys off the top of my head, but I wonder if there were others in the neighborhood. Many of them were cousins. The last person who made me feel aroused was my stepdad when I was in 6th or 7th grade. He taught me how to drive in his car, and I sat on his lap, feeling his body's hardness. I felt disgusted with myself, especially when my mom asked if I had sat on his lap while he was instructing me, and I lied, saying no. Although we now live in different countries, I try to avoid interacting with him as much as possible because I still feel deeply uncomfortable. However, that is challenging since he is the father of my younger siblings. I often blame myself for what happened, but I sometimes wonder what I did to attract them, especially considering my young age. People rarely discuss the hypersexuality and oversexualization that survivors of intimate assault experience. I question whether this would even be considered intimate assault. I despise the fact that I was exposed to such experiences by those other children. I resent the fact that I never received adequate intimacy education in school, even at such a young age. I despise that my mom never provided me with proper guidance. Even now, at the age of 18, she avoids discussing these topics with me. As I venture into college, I avoid men at all costs. I struggle with communication, prefer solitude, have trust issues, and find it challenging to connect with others. I do not see myself entering into a relationship anytime soon, but occasionally, I feel lonely. This only exacerbates my self-loathing.
I think he is cheating on me, but I am not sure. My boyfriend, 19, and me, 16, we both started dating a month back. My first relationship, we met online through a mutual friend. In the start we were so in love, like he was the most green-flagged man, kind, and he is very pretty, but gradually I could feel him losing interest in me. I tried to communicate 2 times, but both times my worries were dismissed, and he told me this is why he didn't want to start dating again. That reasoning bugged me, since if he didn't want to date, then why say yes to me? But anyways, after the second time we started talking more often again, but I noticed a change of pattern in our texts. I have always asked him so many questions, but he has only a few words, 1 sentence at max to say. Sometimes without studies or anything he leaves me undelivered for 6-8 hours. Yesterday I uploaded some pics of myself and tagged him. Although he didn't repost them, he told me he wouldn't because men from his profile might hit me up, which I didn't mind from his side. Today I took pics of the moon because he likes them, so he asked to be tagged on the story where I uploaded a picture of the moon, but despite that he didn't repost, which I found weird because he has a highlight of the moon and there is a girl whose story he had re-uploaded. This highly disturbed me. He posts other women on his story too. Apart from this, there was this one time his friend has posted him and this girl had written a paragraph for him in the comments, but then after I checked the friend's story he went private immediately. He also likes a lot of posts that are something you would send to someone you love, but he didn't send them to me, and likes this fitness influencer a lot. I am currently working on my body, knowing I am not his type, but the way he is acting has me very insecure. Now I am planning to distance myself to keep my sanity in place because this has driven me insane. Would I be the asshole if I asked him whether he is cheating? If so, how do I ask him? My anti-feminist fiancé refuses to change his last name to mine. My 24 fiancé, 29, are planning to get married in the next couple years. We're realistic people and understand that arguments are normal in relationships, but recently we've started applying for our marriage license and the topic of last names came up. I said that I wanted both of us to hyphenate so we have matching last names. The reason why is because my last name is important to me, as I'm the last one in my family with the name. My partner wasn't comfortable taking my last, which I understood, but doesn't want to hyphenate his name. I asked him to clarify, thinking he didn't want our names to change, but he told me the woman hyphenate her name, not the man. I was confused and clarified that we should both hyphenate, and he refused, saying that's not how it works. I asked him to think about it, as it was slightly important to me that we have matching last names. Here's where I think I turned into the jerk. This morning fiancé asked to talk and said he was not changing his name as it made zero sense for him to, and my name wasn't really going to change when I did hyphenate. I was pretty upset but left it alone. Later in the day I spoke with him and said that I understand his point of view, but since we couldn't come to an agreement as to matching names, I would just keep my last name as it is now. He got upset with me and said I was being obtuse, that I know that's not how it works and we wouldn't be considered married if I didn't hyphenate. I argued that this was the best case scenario as we couldn't come to a solution that we were both conformable with. We're trying to be civil, but it's becoming a sore subject and we don't want to fill out paperwork while this is hanging above us. So Reddit, am I the jerk for threatening to keep my last name as is?
Am I the asshole for getting upset about my husband peeing inside of me? My husband literally peed inside of me last night while we were having intercourse. It freaked me out, and I didn't know how to handle it. It was just so weird and disgusting, and I really can't put into words how I felt. But I'm not exactly upset about the pee part, which is still extremely gross and uncomfortable. But if it was an accident, I would only be mad for a few days, and then it would be just another funny incident to bring up later. I'm so mad and disappointed because he did it on purpose. He previously told me about trying to do it, and I already said, no. Please don't. I'm not into that. And he listened, but kept on asking to do it every time we had sex, and I always told him no. This time, he didn't ask, he just went ahead and did it. I was completely caught off guard. I did not agree to this weird and gross experience, and I definitely didn't enjoy it. We had an argument, and he said I killed the fun with my reaction, but he already knew how I felt about it. I really do think him pissing in my vag against my will kill the mood. But whatever. He's still hung up on the fight, saying I overreacted for no good reason at all, but I don't know. I found it really unpleasant and just weird. He did it without my consent, and thinking back about it, he has the same attitude on a lot of things. When we got married, I kept on telling him that I didn't want to do the garter toss, but he went behind my back and added it on our wedding day. I didn't even have a garter, he had one in his pocket and put it on me during the event. It all happened so fast. Many other incidents where similar things happened. Now thinking about it, my husband is like a walking red flag. But also, I could just be overthinking it. I'm not sure, am I overreacting? 911 operators, what call will you simply never forget? The call I'll never forget is the first sewer slide caller I got. It was around 11:30 p.m. and this girl called 911. She must have been 19-20 years old. All she says is that she is just calling to let me know where to find her body. I ask her where she's at, an address, intersection, anything. She tells me she's old enough to know that I already have her location, so she doesn't need to give it to me. That's not true. All I have is the location of the cell tower her cell phone is pinging off of. No way I can find her. I plead with her a bit, and she finally gives me an address. Then, I ask her how she's planning to do it. I'm trying to keep her on the line as long as possible so she doesn't actually hurt herself, but she doesn't answer me anymore. I decided to get the paramedics on the line so we can get police and fire rolling to her location. While I'm connecting to the fire department, I hear this crash and a choking sound. I don't know what she did, but my heart drops. I'm thinking she loved herself with me on the line. I give the address to female D and I have PD on the way. I'm listening on the radio while I'm trying to get this girl to talk to me again when I hear the officers ask to verify the address. They don't see a house there. I finally got this girl to come back on the phone and she's crying hysterically. I ask her what happened and she tells me she was in the bathroom and tried to hang herself. She was too heavy and the shower curtain bar bent. I'm a bit relieved because she's not dead, but she's still in danger. I asked her to give me the address again, and even though she's on the same street, her address is further south. Shit. I have to get officers and email us that are closer to go. I started talking to her and so far so good. Officers get there, but they can't find her. I'm freaking out because I'm thinking she gave me the wrong address again. And she stops talking to me again. Just an open line. I don't know what to do. Silence. I attempted hanging up and calling her. No answer. I'm thinking I effed up. I ask my supervisor if there is anything else I can do, and they reassure me and tell me I did all I could. I listened to the police radio for a bit and saw that the officers managed to get into the house and found the girl and she was being transported to the hospital. It was a huge weight off my shoulders. I took a break for a few minutes to collect my thoughts and went back to answering more calls. We were busy. Teachers, have you ever caught your student cheating in a way that actually impressed you? I'm a physics professor. And as anyone who took physics can tell you, physics is a difficult subject. As a result, I've caught a good number of students cheating, but there is one who I never caught. In class, I would solve the quiz problems on the board, and then cover them up with a projector screen during class. One student in my afternoon class noticed this, and had the smart idea to sneak into the classroom after my morning class. He got a janitor to let him into the room to copy down the problems, which he said were his homework assignment. Now this is the part that impresses me the most. Pretty much any student in my class would have just kept the answers to themselves and their friends. Not this guy. He was a man of the people. When I roll the projector screen down, the computer automatically turns on and the screensaver projects to the board. No big deal, still covers the quiz problems. However, the student had gone onto the computer connected to the projector before class, and had put the quiz answers on the screensaver. So this quiz, when I rolled down the projector screen, the projector started to turn on like usual and I began to take attendance and answer last-minute questions. I had no idea that the answers to the quiz were displayed right on the projector screen behind me. The students took their quizzes, and turned them in like usual. When I graded the quizzes, I was impressed with my students and proud that I was able to explain the material so well. But then I got suspicious. The homework was a mess and the pop quiz was bad. Only one student was able to apply the last quiz's problem to the week's experiment, so I began to question how well the class was really doing. The next quiz, I turned around briefly to sneeze, and I noticed the answers on the board. I stopped writing the answers out on the board, and I stopped rolling down the projector screen during the quizzes. I let the first quiz score stand, as I respected both the cleverness and the generosity of the cheater. I could never figure out who the cheater was, as the janitor just remembered that the student was Asian and male. In my class, that didn't exactly narrow it down. I didn't really want to catch him that bad anyways. He cheated with honor. What small thing screams I'm rich? I was 17 flying home from my sister's house and I struck up a conversation with this well-dressed businessman. My mother was a seamstress and had taught me how to read people's clothes. The dude was super cool and super polite, genuinely just wanted to chat about whatever. We chat for like an hour, then it's time to board. His section is called first and he sees that I didn't get up to board with him. He walks back over and asks to see my ticket. I show him and he gently shakes his head no and smiles while he signals me to follow him to the gate. We get to the gate agent and he says, "This is my friend. Throw away is the seat next to me open. Excellent, I'd like him to have that seat please." Hands her a black credit card and the next thing I know I'm sitting in first class instead of coach. I told him it was very nice of him but he didn't need to spend that kind of money. If I remember right, it was like $800 just so I could sit by him. He explained that that kind of money literally meant nothing to him. He was enjoying our conversation and wanted it to continue. It was the most surreal feeling ever. So I sat in first class enjoying all the perks that bring and talked to this guy about life for the next 3 hours. Turns out he owned several stamping companies that all had government supply contracts and he had accumulated far more than 800 while we had been sitting in the airport talking, let alone the length of the flight. When we landed he explained that most people just fall all over themselves trying to suck up to him once they know WHO he is, but I just talked to him like he was a normal human being and I reminded him of his grown sons from when they were teenagers. He thanked me for the conversation. I thanked him for the great seat and we went our separate ways. That guy had money and he knew what his actual value. My girlfriend cheated on me with my sister. I am writing this while shaking and with tears in my eyes. My girlfriend of 3 years who I thought was the love of my life is cheating on me with my sister. I always had my suspicions that my sister likes girls but I was never sure. However, if we were going out and she knew my girlfriend will be there, she'd change her whole outfit and put on more makeup, but I didn't really think much of it. My girlfriend, however, she always told me that she's straight and she doesn't see no one else but me. She always told me that I'm the love of her life and I really thought this girl was my soulmate. Yesterday I was at my girlfriend's house and her mother called her, so she left me alone in her room for a bit and she kept her laptop open. I saw an Instagram page and she got a notification from my sister, so I got a little curious. When I checked the message I almost threw up. It was a very dirty message, so I started shaking and continued reading the chat and there she is. The love of my life and my sister sending each other naughty clips about what they want to do to each other. They also had explicit pictures and videos of each other and I saw humiliating and heartbreaking jokes about me. When my girlfriend came back to the room I left the messages tab between her and my sister open to let her know I know what she did. She got crazy and started yelling at me, calling me a creep for reading her messages. I get that it's wrong to read her messages, but this was my sister. I really can't believe that any of them did this to me. I was always so close with my sister and my relationship with my girlfriend was perfect. I am devastated and I don't know what to do. I don't want to lose any of them, but this is too heartbreaking and I can never forgive them. I am so lost.
What was the moment you realized your significant other didn't care about you at all anymore? After we had our second daughter, my husband left when she was 2 weeks old to take a job in the family business in another state. This left me with a 2.5-year-old and a newborn at home to try and sell the house and pack up everything. At 44 days old my newborn was diagnosed with RSV and hospitalized. Friends took our toddler and I spent all my time 24/7 in the hospital. It was a severe infection and several times the alarms went off and they had to intervene to keep her alive. The first 4 took 7 attempts and they ended up getting it into a vein in her head. I had no clothes or toiletries, but the nurses gave me scrubs and a patient hygiene kit. I begged my husband to come and be there with us, to help. He told me that the baby was well taken care of and he was too busy. I told him I needed him. He said no. He never came, even though it was a family-owned business and they all supported him taking time off. Once I brought our baby home she had to have breathing treatments every 2 hours night and day along with suctioning. She also needed to eat and have diaper changes, plus I had my toddler, too. I honestly don't remember much about those few weeks. I lived on massive amounts of coffee and sheer determination. He soon became my ex. My girls are both happy, healthy and successful adults today.
My husband's girl best friend is pregnant. Now she's claiming the baby is his. My husband Jason took me on date nights and made sure I was loved and gave me big gifts every so often, telling me I was the only one for him. I believe this since we have been together for 4 years now and I've never had any issues until he introduced his best friend, Laura. I remember we had an argument because he didn't tell me about her for our whole relationship and he had been sneaking to see her and hang out with her at parties when I was sleeping, believing that he was working overtime. I was hurt by this and my first thought immediately went to infidelity. But I found all of their texts to be platonic after he willingly told me to look. I thought she was nice at first since when I first met her she spoke to me politely and said how lucky I was for about a week until there was a get-together and my husband invited me along because it was her mother's anniversary and her family loved my husband as they had known each other since they were kids. I was okay with this and quite excited since I wanted to make more female friends and have girls' nights out to relieve my work stress since my job is difficult and I make 6 figures. I should also mention my husband works in an office job that doesn't pay a lot, so I handle all of the house bills and chores while he is trying to get another job. I walked into the house with my husband and she ran to him happy and immediately wrapped her whole body around his arm and dragged him off to the garden. He didn't even come to get me or anything after being dragged away, so I went to the kitchen to ask for a drink, where I was greeted by Laura's mother. She is a lovely person. We generally had a nice talk about our own lives and she made sure I felt welcome. The whole gathering was mainly nothing special till it got to the dinner. I sat down next to my husband and Laura walked up to me and asked me to move. I asked why, since the only other spot available was next to her uncle and mother, and since it was about her mother, wouldn't she want to sit next to her? Laura replied to the question with because I want to sit next to him. I turned to my husband who just nodded and told me to move as well, saying that I was being childish and making a scene. At this point I generally felt my blood boiling. I stood up and told my husband that I felt uncomfortable and that I need to go to the bathroom and ask where it was. Laura told me that I left the table doing breathing exercises, trying to calm down. I ended up messaging my brother from the bathroom, and he said I was being jealous and that I was overreacting. So I agreed and went back to the table to sit next to Laura's mother. The whole time they were laughing, and it seemed that everything he said was funny to her, and she kept rubbing his back, touching his arms, and saying how strong he had gotten.
It was literally the first compliment I've gotten from the opposite sex about my looks since my girlfriend broke up with me a couple of years ago. I was so caught off guard that I missed the turn off as my coworker hung up on her boyfriend. What was supposed to be a 10-minute drive turned into a 25-minute journey because of my lack of concentration. A few minutes later, her boyfriend called back and she had to explain that she was still on her way home. I didn't have to hear what he was saying to know that he did not like the fact that his girlfriend was still with another man. My coworker eventually became so frustrated, she started yelling at him in Danish, her native language. I think she assumed I wouldn't understand what she was saying, but I did. My best friend was Scandinavian and had taught me over many nights of drinking. My coworker, now speaking Danish, apologized to her boyfriend for upsetting him and said that he had no reason to feel threatened because she would never cheat on him with anyone. Especially not with the guys at work. There I was, still high on the cute dimples compliment, when I heard my coworker roast all the guys she worked with, including me. I guess she was doing it to convince her BF that he was better than us and kind of boost his ego in the process because she really made us sound bad. She said I never blink my eyes and that I walk like I'm riding an invisible bicycle. On top of that, she said my voice was so husky it made her feel like she needed to clear her throat every time she heard me talk. When we finally arrived at her apartment, she said goodnight to me and got out of the car. I responded by saying goodnight in Danish. She turned around beet red, realizing I had understood every word of her conversation in the car. She apologized for everything she had said and promised to buy the drinks next time we had an office party as long as I didn't tell our coworkers. I laughed and agreed, told her to have a good night and headed back home. How did a kissing booth change your life? My name is Elle Evans, and life has been a roller coaster ever since that darn kissing booth. My best friend Lee Flynn and I have always been inseparable. We share everything, our secrets, dreams, and even our birthdays, since we were born on the same day. But there's one rule we've held onto since we were kids: relatives are off limits. You see, we started this kissing booth as a fun tradition for our school carnival. Little did I know, it would turn my world upside down. The summer before junior year, something changed. I started noticing Lee's older brother, Noah Flynn, in a way I never had before. Suddenly, the boy who used to bug me became the guy who invaded my thoughts day and night. At first, I thought it was just a silly crush. But every time I was near Noah, my heart raced, and my stomach filled with butterflies. It was like my whole world had shifted, and I couldn't explain why. I tried to push those feelings aside, reminding myself of the golden rule: relatives are off limits. But my heart had a mind of its own. One day, out of the blue, Noah showed up at our kissing booth. My heart did somersaults when he leaned in and kissed me, shocking everyone. That moment changed everything. A secret romance began, a whirlwind of stolen glances, secret meetings, and stolen kisses. It was thrilling, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once. Keeping our relationship hidden was harder than I thought. Lee, my confidant, had no idea about me and Noah. I couldn't bear the thought of hurting him, of breaking the sacred rule. My emotions were a tangled mess, torn between the loyalty I felt for Lee and the undeniable pull I had towards Noah. I was drowning in a sea of guilt and desire. But life had other plans. As word about the kissing booth's success spread, I found myself facing challenges I never anticipated. Jealousy, rumors, and misunderstandings threatened to tear apart the friendship Lee and I had built over the years. It was a test of loyalty and honesty, and I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, trying not to fall into the abyss. As my feelings for Noah grew stronger, so did the chaos around me. Every stolen moment with him was like a lifeline, a reminder of what we had that was so special and so forbidden. And yet, I knew deep down that I couldn't keep hiding. The truth was bound to come out, and I had to prepare myself for the fallout, no matter how painful it might be. Through it all, I discovered so much about myself. I learned that love is messy, complicated, and doesn't always follow the rules. I learned that growing up means making difficult choices, even if they hurt the people you care about. I learned that my heart could lead me to places I never thought possible, both in joy and in heartache. The kissing booth is more than just a story of secret romances and teenage drama. It's a story of self-discovery, of navigating the stormy waters of friendship and love. As I look back on those crazy days, I realize that every choice I made, every emotion I felt, led me to where I am now. And while the journey was far from easy, I wouldn't change a thing. Final update: I am leaving my wife tomorrow and I couldn't be happier. I know a lot of people were asking for an update, so here goes. Usually when I wake up, I go for a run or a bike ride. While I'm gone, my wife gets up, gets dressed, gets a smoothie going. Whatever. This morning I paced the kitchen, rehearsing what I had to tell her over and over again. When she finally came down, I felt oddly calm. I wasn't expecting to be panicked exactly, but apprehensive at least. I told her I needed to speak to her. She gave me an and didn't look up from the coffee machine. Then I just came out with it. I told her I was leaving and that I wanted a divorce. That we hadn't been happy in a long time and I felt as though she didn't care about me or my emotional needs. Pretty much instantly, the gaslighting began. She cried that I never get her flowers anymore, that I don't do enough to support her, that I don't care if she's happy. I brought up the fact that I suggested therapy over a year ago and she agreed, but then made excuse after excuse not to go. I brought up the times she completely ignored the budget we worked on. I told her how it made me feel when she dismissed me when I tried to tell her how I was feeling. The crying escalated then, along with begging for a chance to make this right, to go to therapy, that she would be better. It went like I thought it would go, and I felt absolutely nothing. I don't care anymore. Whatever I once felt for her is just dead and gone, and she might as well have been a second cousin sobbing about her marriage for all the connection I felt to it. Eventually I just got fed up and walked out. She has been blowing up my phone with calls and texts which range from angry to begging to threatening. I started getting calls from her mother and mine too, but at the end of the day, I spoke briefly to my mother and calmly explained that I was sorry she didn't hear it from me, but my wife was sucking me dry financially and emotionally and I couldn't do it anymore. She was surprisingly supportive. I'm currently in my new apartment. I unrolled the mattress in a box and went to Walmart for sheets. I ate Thai takeout for dinner at the kitchen counter and watched a bit of Netflix on my computer. I have everything I need for the next few days. My wife is getting served tomorrow. I keep expecting the sadness to set in, but it hasn't. I feel like 1,000 pounds are off my shoulders and suddenly my future is full of possibilities. I'm going to travel. I'm going to try new restaurants. I'm going to take a job that actually makes me happy and proud instead of rich. Much to the internet's chagrin, I will ask out the barista, because despite unpopular opinions she is both age appropriate, it's her family's business, and I do have the interpersonal skills to recognize the difference between customer service and actual connection. Cheers, everyone. I'm going to have a beer and then take a walk around my new neighborhood. I was fired from my job for not attending a mandatory work meeting. I was working at a company where we had regular mandatory work meetings. However, one day, I received a call from my boss saying that I was being fired for not attending a mandatory work meeting. I was completely blindsided by this because I had no idea that there was even a meeting scheduled. I checked the schedule app, email, and text messages, but there was no mention of the meeting. I even checked around the workplace to see if there was any notice posted, but there was nothing. I was never verbally told about the meeting either. I was extremely upset about the situation, and I felt like I was being unfairly punished for something that was completely out of my control. I started to wonder if it was even legal for my employer to fire me under these circumstances. After doing some research, I found out that in many states, employers are allowed to fire employees for any reason, as long as it is not related to discrimination or retaliation for things like whistleblowing. However, in my case, it seemed like my employer had not provided adequate notice of the meeting, which may have violated their own policies. I decided to take legal action and hired a lawyer to help me file a complaint. It was a long and stressful process, but eventually, I was able to negotiate a settlement with my former employer. They agreed to pay me compensation for the wrongful termination, and I was able to move on and find a better job. The experience taught me a valuable lesson about understanding my legal rights as an employee and standing up for myself when I feel like I've been treated unfairly. What's the coldest thing a doctor has ever said to you? Not to me, but to my mom. 15th of July is asshole day in my family. Why, you may ask. When I was 9 years old, my mom got pregnant. I was so excited to have a sibling. But a few years after, my mom finally told me what had happened before she told me she was pregnant. When she first found out, she was so happy. Her first doctor checkup was fine. She went back about a week after, and there the doctor, a different one, did the ultrasound, looked at my mom, and simply said, "I'm sorry. You lost your baby. It's dead." No explanation, nothing. My mom cried but came back home as if nothing had happened. She told my stepdad but not me. I had no idea of what was happening in my home. I don't remember seeing my mom cry. She would always make sure I wasn't around. In the next 2 weeks, she realized she still had all the pregnancy symptoms, still had the same cravings. She was sure she hadn't lost the baby. She went back and got an appointment with the same doctor as last time. It was at the hospital. You couldn't really choose who you would see. When she explained that she was still experiencing all the pregnancy symptoms, he denied all of it. He told her she was doing a phantom pregnancy, that she was too old, 37, to have a baby, so she just imagined she was having one. She refused to accept it and demanded another doctor to do the ultrasound. It took a while, but finally another doctor came to see my mom. Took him about a minute to find my brother with the ultrasound. Dr. 1 was so embarrassed he didn't even apologize. Dr. 2 explained that Dr. 1 was still a student, hence why he made a mistake. I don't know why that student was doing ultrasounds alone. All I know is, the first thing my mom did when coming home was telling she was pregnant. She was first told my brother was dead on July 15th. So we commemorate that day as asshole day, and my mom usually goes out with my brother. Ever been ghosted? How did you deal with the hurt? Last year, I matched with an American on Tinder. Despite living in Europe, he planned to relocate to my country for his daughter's better future. We quickly developed a strong connection and started texting every day. I stayed up late to chat with him, and he greeted me every morning before bed. Our feelings grew, and we even had video calls. My friends could tell how much I liked him, and he claimed the same. I trusted and opened up to him more than anyone before. As his moving date approached, I eagerly offered help with research and preparation, imagining the day we would finally meet. It had been 5 months of constant texting by then. Unfortunately, He began experiencing family issues, and our communication became sporadic. I respected his need for space and checked in on him, but received no response. I worried something had happened to him. Eventually, he thanked me for caring and shared vague updates, but then stopped replying altogether. At first, I gave him space, not wanting to appear pushy. Occasionally, I sent lighthearted messages as an open invitation for him to reach out. However, I went through phases of anger and sadness. I couldn't understand why he had chosen to ignore me without explanation. I questioned what I had done wrong. Sadly, my attempts to seek answers remained unanswered. This experience was entirely new for me. It was my first time developing feelings for someone solely through text. It was also the first time someone close to me had cut me off without any reason. I was ghosted, and it hurt deeply. It still hurts, even after 2 months. I no longer desire a relationship with him, but I yearn for closure. Unfortunately, it seems that the reasons behind his actions will forever remain a mystery. It will take time for me to regain trust and open up to someone in the same way again. Thank you for reading my story until the end. You're going to notice a woman in your home. You must ignore her. It was December of 1999 when she infested our quiet, Midwestern home. My father called for me after eating out the neighbor. I assumed it was time for dinner. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs and had his hand up in an effort to keep me from coming down. The moment I saw the panic in his eyes, I knew something was wrong. I want you to listen to me very carefully, he said. My heart started to race as he continued. It's very important that you keep your eyes on me. You're going to notice someone else in our home, but you must ignore her as much as possible. I almost started laughing. My 12-year-old mind trying to comprehend what he was getting at, assuming this was some sort of out-of-character joke. Before I could respond, he continued. She's going to whisper things, follow you, and whatever else she can to get your attention. It's going to be very difficult, son, but you must never interact with her. I promise she will leave, but only if you pretend she isn't there, and try not to think about her. Promise me. There were so many things I wanted to ask him, but I was too frightened and confused. I managed to spit out, okay, Dad. Alright, come downstairs. It's time for dinner. Hurry, I've made her stronger just by telling you. But I had to. I can't afford you looking at her by mistake. Trust me. Now stay focused. He barked. I did as I was told and slowly crept down the stairs, keeping my eyes glued to my father's as he backpedaled into the kitchen. I felt the temperature drop significantly as I reached the first floor. I smelled a familiar, sickening and sour scent in the air. It reminded me of the time a raccoon died in our wall and stunk up the house for a whole week. My father and I sat down at the table at the same time. My sister was across from me. Her head hung and her eyes stared at the empty, porcelain plate in front of her. My mother pulled a casserole out of the oven. Her eyes were swollen and tear-stained. I kept my focus on my family, but out of the corner of my eye I could see a blurry mess of dark, matted hair, and sickly, gray skin. There was no energy in the kitchen, drained of all the warmth and laughter that usually accompanied our meals. My sister grabbed my knee under the table and whispered, "Can you see her too?" I nodded. "Quiet." My father hissed. The woman walked forward with wet, crackling footsteps. The smell was nauseating. She crept towards the table, stopping directly behind my sister, only a few inches away, and rested a decrepit hand on her shoulder. She winced in fear and stared at me. I immediately put my head down. My mother served our dinner, doing her best to pretend as if everything was okay. I could see my father clutching my sister's hand underneath the glass table in an attempt to keep her from completely losing it. My sister spent the entire dinner with the skeletal hand on her shoulder. Nearly inaudible whispers spewed from the woman's mouth and filled the room like white noise. And that's how we lived for months, doing our best to live a normal life despite the ever-present, unwanted guest. Even if we left the house, she was somehow able to follow us all. Whenever the four of us were in the car, she could be seen in the rear-view mirror or standing on the side of the road. My parents didn't let anyone visit, and never let us stay at friends' homes during the months of hell. We were able to whisper to one another when it was absolutely necessary to discuss her presence, if she wasn't too close. My father made us promise to never tell anyone. That was the only way to quarantine her, the parasite of attention. We concluded that she infected a single household at a time, unable to be seen by anyone outside the home unless their mind had been tainted with knowledge of her existence. I learned a few years later that my father was the reason for her arrival. His sister, back in the 70s, had been infected from another and had followed my aunt into their home. In 1999, for whatever reason, my father struggled to keep the thought of her at bay. In turn, he brought her back into his life. And ours. We kept the promise of keeping her a secret from others, and it was the hardest thing we've ever done. All of us tried leaving the house as a group, and she followed. We couldn't bring ourselves to break our family apart. It was hardest for my mother, who was stuck alone with her while we were at school and my father was at work. Everything changed the day my mother broke. It was a snowy February night. We had finished dinner and my mother decided to go to bed early. She was sitting on their bed, making herself almost impossible to ignore. My mother couldn't take it. I heard her screaming from the bedroom, demanding that she leave us alone. My father sprinted upstairs to try and stop her. That was the last I ever saw my mother. A pool of blood on the white carpet was all that remained. The woman was still there, but my mother was gone. In the following weeks, she whispered to me. She told me I could see my mother again. All I had to do was look and ask how. I never did. The reason I am telling you is because I want you to think about her. I saw her again, this morning, for the first time in 18 years. I cannot afford to lose my wife or children to the parasite. I need you to think about her dark hair and gray skin. Think about her in your home, so that she may leave mine. You're already infected, and eventually you're going to notice a woman in your home. You must ignore her. It's for your own good. I'm so sorry. Have you ever encountered a serial killer? My sister-in-law encountered Ivan Milat, one of the two men that inspired the Wolf Creek series. She was traveling the east coast of Australia for a few weeks with her brother. One night, her and her brother were having jerky and beer by a campfire when Malat sat down at their campfire. When she first saw him, she thought he was a park ranger because of his style of dress. She thought he was going to tell them that they built their campfire in a prohibited area, but instead he commented on what a beautiful evening it was and pointed out some of the notable stars in the sky. Ivan never properly introduced himself. He just sat down and started chatting. He asked my sister-in-law where she was from, and she told him Darwin. He said, "What's a Darwin girl doing all the way out here?" My sister-in-law explained that she was on a road trip. She seemed to pique his interest when she told him that instead of doing the usual beach vacation, she wanted to do something a little more rugged, like explore caves, do a little rock climbing, and hike trails that were not popular with the tourists. My sister-in-law says that Ivan was friendly, and he had a lot of ideas about places she might like to go, including a cave that had a waterfall inside, which was a bit of a hidden gem not well known to tourists. She felt comfortable talking with him, and when he invited her and her brother to join him at his campsite for some rabbit stew and beer, she would have said yes, but her brother instantly turned him down. Ivan's response to the rejection was a slight, "Well, I tried," shrug of the shoulders. He went back to his campsite, and her brother quickly packed their things in their rented Land Rover, and they wound up sleeping in the Rover outside a well-lit gas station that night. She said what was so scary about that night is that she felt almost immediately comfortable around Ivan, no red flags whatsoever. He reminded her of one of her uncles. That worked construction, one of those rugged but worldly kind of guys, while her brother was immediately suspicious of the charming stranger. She kind of wonders what would have happened to her if her brother had not been there that night.
I ruined my daughter's best friend relationship because I wouldn't let the other 10-year-old leave my house with a guy I didn't know. I am honestly not sure what is going on. Abby is my daughter's best friend and Amy is her mom. For background, these two girls have been best friends since kindergarten. They have celebrated birthdays, Christmas, and millions of sleepovers. Abby spends so much time at my home I even got my daughter a trundle bed for when she spends the night. Now to the story. This started last Monday. Amy works the night shift and sometimes her mom can't watch Abby. Amy asked me to watch Abby Friday night and that she would pick her up Saturday afternoon. I have no problem watching Abby. She is a sweetheart, so I agreed. This is also a regular thing for us. Abby spends at least one Friday of the month at my home. Well, fast forward to Friday, and there haven't been any updates to change the sleepover plans. Friday comes and I pick the girls up. We have a normal sleepover day, watching movies, eating snacks, ordering pizza, etc. Well, the girls are in their room, and I am in my room when my Ring camera gives me a notification that someone is at my door. I look at my camera and it is a guy that I don't recognize. It is 9:15, so not extremely late, but I still didn't physically answer my door. I responded on my camera asking who was he and what he wanted. The mystery guy told me that he was Amy's boyfriend and was there to get Abby. These are my issues with that. I don't know this man. I didn't know Amy was even dating a guy, especially not serious enough for him to show up unannounced at my home, and when I showed Abby the guy and asked if she knew him, she just said, "That's my mom's friend that comes over when I'm getting on the bus." I asked her if she knew his name or anything else and Abby said no. At this point, I have already texted and called Amy several times to try and ask her, but I am not getting any response. I tell the guy using my camera that Amy isn't responding to me and that I need her permission before I give him her child. The mystery guy tries to convince me saying that he was supposed to watch Abby at first but something came up. He ended up free now and wanted to get her. I still expressed that without a text, call, or something from Amy I wouldn't allow Abby to leave my home. Plus, I was told that Abby was supposed to be with her grandmother before the plans changed to me. The mystery guy got upset and hit my door then left. I genuinely thought this was the right thing to do. For me, this was a stranger that Abby didn't know, asking to get Abby at 9 p.m. without having any proof but telling me that Amy told him to. Well, that was the wrong thing to do apparently. Saturday morning comes, and I am up making breakfast when someone starts banging on my door. I open the door and Amy comes in cussing, screaming, the whole 9 yards. She is accusing me of stealing her child, saying she will report me to CPS, and a lot of threats. Essential to Amy, I was supposed to send her daughter with a man that Abby, her daughter, and I didn't know. According to her, her boyfriend, whom she has been dating for 4 months, should be allowed to randomly come over and get Abby. I may have reacted poorly because I laughed. By this point, Amy woke up the girls and they were watching her yell while I laughed and got breakfast ready. I questioned her, "Why didn't you text me back any time last night? You've been off work for a while. How did you just now realize that your daughter was still here? Why didn't you text or call me telling me about the change of plans, and how was I supposed to know some guy was coming to get Abby if you told me your mom was supposed to watch her before me?" Amy's responses were basically that she didn't have to report every guy she screwed to me, and I agree she doesn't. But, if you have a stranger coming to my home to get your child that is in my care, I deserve to at least know someone is coming. She left after this. Now, Abby has told my daughter that Amy says they can't be friends until I apologize. I'm torn because part of me wants my daughter to have good friendships, but I honestly don't understand how I am even close to being wrong. I'm still trying to decide if I need to apologize.
My friend got hard while wrestling me. My friends are over right now, and we just do the usual stuff like playing COD Zombies and talking about girls and stuff. We wrestle occasionally playfully with him, usually winning because he's just physically stronger and bigger than me. I'm on the smaller, slimmer side. But today, we were wrestling with us both shirtless cause it's hottest in Texas while wrestling when I was on top of him trying to pin him. I felt him get hard, it made me hard as well, and we kinda stared at each other in shock or something. He's still at my house and we're both alone. It's super awkward right now, we're both 16. Does this make us gay, or is it just our bodies being aroused? He sorta told me he likes me I think. Y'all confusing the F out of me. He asked to experiment a bit, and I said yes to help him out to see if he was gay. We kissed, and he said he was probably gay for me since my bodies are feminine and then he said I'm cute. We both got hard from the kiss, but I still don't think I'm gay. Maybe he is gay, but I don't think I'm gay. I might continue helping him find out if he's gay or not but only as a friend, because I want to help him find out. He told me he's gay and that he does like me. He says it's because I'm similar to a girl, and because I look gay. I don't know what he means by looks gay. I told him I don't know if I'm gay like he is, so now we're sitting in silence, but he's kinda holding me from behind, and I feel too awkward to say anything about it. I'm not gay, but my friend is, so I'ma just support him and stuff. He wants me to be his boyfriend but I'm not gay, so I just told him to let me think about it. He is still at my house since he was originally staying the night. We've just been mostly quiet with the occasional questions or requests he asked. I'm probably not going to do anything with him because I'm not gay, and if they're going to call me gay at least try to give a reason. Caught feelings for my friend with benefits. What now? Update: a few months ago, I matched with a girl on Tinder who I knew from high school. We had been friends on Instagram, so I reached out and asked her out on a date. To my surprise, she agreed. From the beginning, she made it clear that she wasn't looking for a relationship, just going with the flow. Despite that, I found myself falling in love with her. She's everything I could ever ask for: beautiful, smart, ambitious, and we have a great connection. This weekend, something clicked during our perfect Saturday together, and I realized my feelings for her were deepening. The issue is that she's seeing other guys. She's mentioned several times that she isn't ready for a relationship and is talking to 5 other guys currently, although I'm the one she sees the most. She encouraged me to date other people, but every time I try, I can't shake the feeling of why am I here when I have her? Lately, she's been distant, barely messaging me despite my attempts to reach out. I decided to check out Hinge, and there I stumbled upon her active profile today. I believe I need to have an honest conversation with her. I texted her, expressing my desire to talk, and she agreed. Now, I'm struggling with what to say. I don't want to lose her, and I also don't want to come across as pushy. But she needs to know that I want more from our connection. I'm looking for advice on how to approach this discussion. Edit: I want to add some more details from my comments to clarify how this situation is strange. It feels like we're already in a relationship, despite not being exclusive. She has even met my family and recently invited me to have dinner with her and her mom. Alongside my other emotions, confusion has settled in. Are these normal things to happen in a casual dating scenario? It doesn't seem like it, so I'm receiving mixed signals. We'll likely see each other tomorrow, and I've decided to have this conversation in person rather than over a call. Minor update: this update is coming a bit later than expected as we haven't been able to see each other much lately. However, I called her last night, and we had a talk. I confessed my feelings and expressed my desire for exclusivity. She responded that if we become exclusive, it wouldn't be any different from being in a relationship. So, she suggested that if we go exclusive, we may as well start a relationship. She'll take some time to think it over, and we'll meet this weekend, hoping she'll have an answer by then. I have to be honest, I'm not feeling confident about the outcome, and I'm unsure how I'll handle rejection. Thank you to everyone for the advice. Am I the bad person for telling my extended family how many men, roughly, my sister has slept with after she outed our youngest brother as a virgin? We had a family dinner this evening. My family has 4 kids in total: me, my elder sister, 29F, younger sister, 24F, and youngest brother, 22M. Extended family attended our family dinner. So all of our significant others, our cousins, aunts and uncles etc. During the dinner my elder sister and youngest brother got into a mild disagreement. My sister seemed, at least to me, to be coming across as very aggressive out of frustration and losing said argument. The 2 of them were too absorbed in their argument to realize the rest of us were getting a bit fed up. Eventually my sister got really fed up and said, "Shut up, I'm not going to argue with a 22-year-old virgin." My brother hadn't done any personal attacks up until that point. It was completely unprovoked. I think it might have been the alcohol as my sister is mean while intoxicated. Anyway, I immediately told my sister to grow up and that she was making an embarrassment of herself. She replied by saying everyone knows he's a virgin and she didn't say anything wrong. This annoyed me as my bro definitely has confidence issues and doesn't need to be made fun of like this. So I responded by saying how she slept with well over 100 men while she was in college, and that since everyone in the family knows this it's not a big deal, right? Turns out her husband didn't know this. Amazingly, I genuinely assumed he must have known. He left the party angrily saying my sister misled him about her past. Family is blaming me for their marital problems. I refuse to accept I did anything wrong. My sister bullied my brother in front of everyone. All I did was give her a taste of her own medicine.